Welcome everyone to the live stream. It's time for the Network Plus study group in about 10 minutes. So if you're watching this live, just hang out for 10 minutes. We'll be getting things ready to go on this side. If you're watching on the replay, well, you could still hang out for 10 minutes, I suppose. Or you can fast forward. Or you can simply rewind and keep doing this over and over again, as if you're caught in some temporal time loop. Over and over again, as if you're caught in some temporal time loop. See what I just did there? Let's change the website so that it shows that we are live. Let's see, that'd be under settings, which for some reason I'm unable to read. There we go. And let's change the message. My Network Plus study group is right now. How about is happening now? Click here to join us. That's a little too much exclamation mark. How about we click here to join us is just a plain non-punctuated at all. Okay, /live, that looks good. I shouldn't try to do things and talk at the same time. Of course, that's what I'll be doing over the next 2 hours, so maybe I shouldn't say that. All right, that looks good. Website is updated. Folks are live. The chat room is live. Let me flip over to that instead of watching what's going on. Should probably get out of Discord completely. Boom. All right. Not my calendar. There we go. Live Network Plus study group. It is at professormesser.com/live, which is also good for you folks to know over on the YouTube side. There's no chat on YouTube, but there is on my website. So you can go to www.professormesser.com/live to see the chat. So that all works out. Okay, that's good. That's live. I see folks are joining. Welcome, welcome. We've got updates here. I've got Socrative is already going. I need a presentation, and we need to do some camera checks of camera 1. That's camera 1. I kind of like where that is. Camera 2, which is me. Camera 3. I should probably put something up that would be something worth seeing. Oh, I don't have it up in front of me. I can't see anything in front of me. It's over on the side. All right. Did that turn on? Let's find out. No. How about now? Trying to get things up and running here. There we go. Now I can see what's in front of me. Camera 3 is that one with me in it. Hi. And camera 4. That all works. Who would have thunk? Get things ready to go here. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. We're heading towards another 6.5 minutes, and we'll get started. And I think everything is ready to go. We've got our recordings going on down here. You can see little Cylons going. We've got recordings going on the TriCaster, which is this system here. We've got recordings going on YouTube, because everything you're seeing is also being recorded. Oh, good. Justin got his study guide, his course notes book, like this one, like this fabulous course notes book in the mail, in full living color. Little Rock's checking in. Very nice. Oh, I just about lost the laptop there. Did you see that? Did you see what happened there? Got to get that going. Let's see. Pinpoints up. Okay, I've got everything I need, I think. I think. If not, we'll know very quickly. If we don't, things won't go well at all. We can just stop all of this nonsense. I've got plenty of questions for you today. Plenty of things to do. And we'll be taking phone calls. I guess I should probably make sure that is ready to go. With the phone calls, let's log in. Oh, it was an error processing forum. I always like those. Let's host a show. Da, 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 da. Midway's checking in. Now, that's one you don't see very often in Midway, Florida. But I've visited very often myself on my way to Quincy. There is, because I got Ken over in Quincy. Let's see. those are ready. So I don't want to start that yet. All right. Germany checking in. Welcome, my people. A lot of Florida. There's Pensacola. Charlotte's there. Haven't been to Charlotte in a while. Need to get back there. Seattle's in the chat room. Houston, Texas. What is that? The third most populous city in the country? Maybe the first, second, somewhere in there. It's a big city. I know Jacksonville, Florida is the largest by area because the entire county is effectively the city. It's kind of a weird thing. So Fort Myers and Bradenton, everybody from Florida. Have I just pulled in all of the coast here? The East Coast. Is that how it works? No, because we got California. There's Chicago. There's Seattle. So we got a few in there. Alabama. I got relatives there as well. All about the Southeast. I got kinfolk in there. You live in Biloxi and work in Florida. I feel your pain. I used to live in Florida and work in California. So that was a little weird. Actually, at one point I was living in Florida and basically did not have a territory. The entire world is where I would go. So I just hop on a plane on Monday and I'd fly to places, domestic and international, and then come back at the end. I didn't have a desk. I don't think I've ever had a desk in a long time. Let's see. It's been an awfully long time since I've had a desk in a building, in an office building. I've had a desk at home, like this studio, but not in an office building in a long time. Oh, New Jersey. Welcome, Prof. JR. Welcome from New Jersey. In Fairbanks, Alaska. That's a good place to be right now. British Columbia. That's where Mrs. Professor Messer's people are. Well, just sort of scattered about the northern part of the continent, all up there in Canada. Got to get up there. I need to take her up there to Canada. And Phoenix and Louisville. Not Louisville. What am I doing? I flew and drove through there. Have I ever stayed there? I may have. Phoenix, I certainly have. It should be, have I been there? Because I've been at all the big major locations in the U.S. to do presentations and trade show things and that type of thing, and a number of things. And finally, Ahmed asked the important question: when will the questions be started? Louisville. Thank you, Chris. Louisville. See, you got to get that right. Ahmed, the questions will be started. We will start the actual show. This is not a show. This is the worst show you've ever watched. The first 10 minutes here, we don't actually start till the top of the hour. So you got 2.5 minutes, and we will get through the first announcements or so, and then we're asking questions. I got good stuff happening then. I have been up to Maryland. DerbyCon would be fun. I should have just gone for the Derby. See, that would have been fun. But no, didn't make it. Is Network Plus more difficult than Security Plus? I think the difficulty levels are comparable. Obviously, it's completely different content, but I don't think it's any more or less difficult given the type of content that you will be asked. And now I'm trapped. Now I'm caught around my chair. What happened? And I'm being pulled backwards. Won't this be a fun study group? What has happened? Oh, there we go. Figured it out, everybody. We can continue with the show. All right. Not continue, but kind of start. Is it better to take Network Plus before Security Plus? It really depends. What are you trying to do? What's your point? What are you looking to do? What's the objective? Certification is not the end game. The certification gets you to the end game. So a lot of people just take Security Plus. It's where they start. Some people like to have a good networking foundation. They may not even go into security, so they take Network Plus and then go another direction like the CCNA routing and switching. Just depends on what you're doing. Top of the hour, we'll take more questions from you in hour number 2. I'll open up the phone lines. We'll do Q&A from the chat room. So if you have other questions, save them up. We'll do that. Otherwise, we've got Q&A right now, live. Let's start the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2018 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. This is the Network Plus Study Group for May. We do one of these every month where I will ask you questions in this first hour, and we'll see how well you do. You will interactively be able to answer these questions online. I'll tell you in just a moment how we managed to end up doing something like that through the magic of the internet. I'm able to do this thanks to your support. Feel free to follow what we're doing on Twitter by going to professormesser.com/Twitter. You should absolutely go to YouTube and subscribe to professormesser.com/YouTube. And of course, you can smash the button thing to be notified when new videos are there. A lot of new videos on Network Plus. We'll talk about that in a moment. And don't forget about the voucher discounts. You can get 10% off your vouchers by going to professormesser.com/vouchers. I have both a N10006 and shortly the N10007 course available for purchase if you wanted to have one that was downloadable. So you can find out more on the website right now. To get to the 006, it's at professormesser.com/getnetplus, and that comes with all the videos. It comes with audio versions of that, and it comes with my course notes, which are kind of nice too. We'll talk about that in a moment. There's lots of stuff to talk about. We're doing it today. There are also free questions for your N10006 out on professormesser.com/pop quiz. Also, if you're studying for A+ or Security Plus, there's lots of things there that you can look at. All free pop quizzes available at professormesser.com/pop quiz. A lot of people like to get an audio version of this study group that just automatically ends up in their podcatcher application, their podcast listening program. You can subscribe to any of my study groups and listen to them live or interactively, not live, but interactively at professormesser.com/podcasts. Podcasts. I should maybe make that simpler to say. And there's plenty there. The RSS feeds are there. You can put it right into your podcast reader. And if there's a podcast index you would like to see this on, I think I've added it to most indices, like the Apple and the Google. But if there's one you'd like it added to, just let me know. Send me a note. Today we're going to talk about Network Plus, though. There's a lot going on with Network Plus. There's actually 2 different Network Plus exams you could take right now. You have to choose which one of these you want to take. The N10006 is the version of the exam that's been out since February the 28th of 2015. That version has been updated to a brand new exam, which is the N10007. It was released on March the 1st of this year. So we're in this odd transitional period here in May 9th of 2018, because you have to take this into account if you're watching this on the replay, that on August 31st of this year, the N10006 will be phased out completely. The N10007 obviously will stay probably for about 3 years. Usually they keep a test active for about 3 years. So there's this time period right now until August the 31st where you get to choose which set of tests you'd like to take. You're going to just take one of them. You don't take both. And so you have to choose, which exam do I want to take? Do I want to take the N10006, which is a little bit older? The content really isn't that old because networking technology doesn't tend to phase out as quickly as other technologies. So the content in there is still very, very relevant. There's also a lot more study materials available because it's been out for 3 years. But the N10007 is the newer version. It will not be phased out in August. So if you're like me and it takes you a long time to finally get to take the exam, you may want to start with the N10007. That one has a lot more content available. It's only been out since March, but there are study materials and books available for you to use. So it's not like you're going out and just trying to find something that doesn't exist. There's plenty there for you to choose from. It's just not quite as many as the N10006, which makes sense. It's been out for 3 years. Of course it is. Doesn't matter which one you take. Whether you pass the 006 or the 007, you have earned the Network Plus certification. The certification doesn't have any type of stipulation or message or content on there that says what version of the exam you took. You've done everything you needed to do to take the Network Plus. In reality, you'll probably never take another Network Plus exam again. You will simply renew it through the years. Most employers are only interested in knowing if you have a current valid Network Plus certification. They really don't care what version of the exam you took. I haven't found one yet anyway. So when you're thinking about what exam I take, that's my recommendation. Consider those pluses and minuses of both. Pick one and go for it. I don't think either one of these exams is more difficult or any different than the other. It's just a different set of exam objectives. Make sure all of the study materials that you are using match the version of the exam you're going to take. It's over 30% new content on the N10007. So if you study from N10006 materials and you go and take the N10007, you're not going to do as well as you probably could have because you're missing 30% of the exam materials. So make sure that if you're planning to take the 007, you study from N10007 materials. If you're planning to take the N10006, you're studying from 006 study materials. Make sure they match. That's important for any certification exam, especially for CompTIA. As long as they match, you're going to do fine. Make sure that you have all of those matching. Today, I'm going to ask you questions, and you're going to answer them. And you use an online service called Socrative to do this. There's a quick link you can use to get there. Pop open a new window. Go to professormesser.com/QA. That will take you right to the Q&A page. In fact, there's a question already waiting for you. So you'll know if you typed everything in because you'll see the question that's there. There's also an app available for your mobile devices if you'd rather use an app. This is the Socrative student app, and it will ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, Professormesser. Make sure you spell it right, one word, all lowercase, and you'll also be placed into the room where you will see this right here. You'll see a question. How does the BPDU guard function help to decrease STP convergence time? If nothing, the Network Plus exam is very good in its use of acronyms and abbreviations. So there's also a very important consideration. How does the BPDU guard function to help decrease STP convergence time? And as you answer, I'll be able to see your answers coming through. So you'll see that you can see the differences. Now, this is a question from last month. So if you joined us last month, you might remember this question. This is something so that you can get logged into Socrative, you can answer the question, you kind of see how it's done before we jump into answering some of the new questions that are there. How does the BPDU guard function help to decrease STP convergence time? Does it A, enable QoS on looping frames? Does it B, bypass the listening and learning states? Does it C, increase CPU priority for BPDU traffic? Does it D, block interfaces after a traffic spike? Or does it E, dedicate a VLAN for BPDU traffic? One of those is how BPDU guard functions. That's what you need to know. This is a 007 question for sure. I don't think BPDU guard was in the 006. It's all starting to blend together. It's hard to remember what was on 6 and what was on 7 because my 007 videos are now available. I've completed my 007 course on my website. So if you're somebody who is trying to learn the N10007 materials, the 007 is all there and ready to go. Some people have even mentioned the chat room, but there's more videos for the 006 than 007. Don't look at the number of videos. It's a completely restructured course. In the 006, I split things into smaller pieces, but I really felt it made more sense if I put a lot of things together. So don't worry about the number of videos. It's completely different exam objectives as well. So you really can't compare minutes and hours and number of videos. Don't get into that. I cover every single objective from the CompTIA exam objectives in every single one of my video courses. So you're always covered. The answer, BPDU guard, now that you've had a chance to look at it, is used, spanning tree uses BPDU guard. It's used in conjunction with spanning tree. Normally when you connect to a network, there's a delay while the switch determines if you connecting to the network is going to create some type of loop. And with traditional older style spanning tree, this can take 20 to 30 seconds before you can even do anything. So there is Cisco calls it port fast, but the generic name for it is BPDU guard, where it just lets you onto the network. It doesn't do any type of thinking about whether a loop will happen. Only if it sees a BPDU will it finally start working and jumping in here and turning off the interface, because a single workstation shouldn't be sending bridge protocol data unit frames. The only thing that should be sending a bridge protocol data unit frame is a bridge. It's another switch. So that's how BPDU guard works. lets everybody onto the network. So if you answered B, if you answered C, then you were wrong. If you answered B, bypasses the listening and learning states, 48% of you got that one right. So that is the way we do this. I'll ask you a question, you will answer online, and you'll have all of this ready to go. Now, the questions we're going to talk about today are questions that are, all of the questions today will apply to the 007 exam. Some of the questions today will also apply to the 006 exam. In fact, I think one of the first questions we'll do will apply to both. But I wrote all of the questions today for the 007 exam. If you're someone who's taken the 006 and you'd like to take 006 questions or go through a study group, you've got 3 years of study group replays on the ProfessorMesser.com website. You can go through all of those, and those are focused on 006. So that might help you if you're trying to find materials. This first question, though, applies for both of you. So if you're taking either exam, here's one that will absolutely work well for you. This first question, by the way, is a performance-based question. So if you're somebody who, if you've never taken the Security Plus, Network Plus, A Plus course, or any of these courses from CompTIA, you may not be aware of this. Most certification exams tend to be multiple choice. But CompTIA has added some additional questions to the beginning of the exam that are anything but multiple choice. They could be fill in the blank. They could put you at a command prompt and ask you to perform a function. They may ask you to put things in a particular order, sort from highest to lowest or lowest to highest. It could be any type of those types of questions. It might be a network diagram, and they'll ask you questions about what is on this network diagram, how it applies back to the exam objectives. So make sure that you understand that that's what you're going to be hit with first. A lot of people will flag those and skip over them. And like me, I do that. I skip over the performance-based questions, and I take all the multiple choice questions first, and then I come back to the very beginning. CompTIA allows you to do that on their exams. So that might be a strategy that you might want to use for sitting down and taking your exam, especially when you first sit down, because you might get a question like this. First thing, here's your question. Put these technologies in order from fastest throughput to slowest. That's the question. Put these technologies in order from fastest throughput to slowest. The technologies are A, E3, B, cable broadband, C, 1000 base SX, D is an OC192, and E is one stream of 802.11 AC. So I want you to put those technologies in order from fastest to slowest. If you think they are already in the correct order, because this is a fill-in-the-blank question online, simply type A, B, C, D, E. You do not want to answer in the chat room. You don't want to put any hints in the chat room. We're all going to take this question as if we're sitting in front of it for the exam. We don't have access to Google. We don't have access to anyone else. We can't phone a friend. We can't do a 50-50. We simply have to take the best guess we can. So if you think the answer is already there in the right order, it isn't. You would simply type in A, B, C, D, E. You don't have to type in all those names as I watch these go by on Socrative. But you may want to think about what technologies go above others. What are the speeds? These are the types of things you may be asked on the exam. It's rare for CompTIA to ask you what the abbreviation means. They may not say, BP, what is BPDU? They're never going to ask that. They're never going to ask what that is. But they may ask you, like the original question we were going through, when you're using BPDU guard, how does it make things faster with STP? So you have to know, what is STP in this reference? What is BPDU? How do those things work together? They want to know how those abbreviations and acronyms are applied to using these technologies. They don't really care if you know what the name is. I mean, they do care, but they're going to find out if you know what that is by how you use it. So see how sneaky they are? They are not going to simply just ask you for abbreviations, which is why I tell people, don't worry about doing flashcards with BPDU, Bridge Protocol Data Unit. In fact, you don't even have to remember its Bridge Protocol Data Unit if you know what a BPDU does. See how that's nice? So let's see how we did with putting these technologies in order from fastest throughput to slowest. Almost forgot how we did this. So let's start at the beginning. The first technology, the one that is the fastest in this list, is OC192. In this particular list of technologies, that was the fastest. That is a 9.95 gigabit per second. It's effectively what we had 10 gig technology before we had Ethernet running at 10 gig. We were running ATM networks at OC 192 and SONET-based networks at OC 192, and that gave us 10 gig effectively, just under that. The next slowest, since we're putting these in order from fastest to slowest, the next slowest is C 1000 base SX. This particular speed is in the name, isn't it? It's that 1000. The 1000 in 1000 base SX means that it is a 1000 megabit per second technology. So that's 1 gigabit for those of you that are doing your conversions at home between Fahrenheit and Celsius. So you know there that you've got 1000 base SX. We went from 9.95 gigabit to 1 gigabit. The next fastest technology would be one single stream of 802.11ac. Those of you familiar with 802.11ac know that it uses multi-user MIMO. It can use multiple streams if your in stations and your access point supports that. And one of those streams runs really at its best possible theoretical throughput of 866.7 megabits per second, just under a gig. Very close, but not quite there. So that's why that's number 3. The next one down is B, cable broadband. And admittedly, this one is one that has a wide range that it could be. But let's take the best possible speed of what we're seeing on cable broadband generally today, and the highest speeds you would ever see download with what we're using. This is probably DOCSIS 2 and not DOCSIS 3, but around 250 megabits per second. But clearly it fits right there between one stream of 802.11ac and E3. Because E3, much older type of technology, its total speed is 34.368 megabits per second. Usually we really talk about 34 megabits is what we call it when we're talking about those. So you do run into those scenarios with those technologies that do allow you these types of speeds. So if you were running, like some of you in the chat room are running DOCSIS 3.1, that could have a potential highest throughput of 1 gig. All right, move that up. I'm flexible. You can move it up to be a tie for second place. I'm fine with that. I got flexibility. This isn't the actual exam, but of course that makes us think about how these different speeds and different things change through time. Really, the only thing that does change through time is that B, cable broadband. That was a very broad one. I guess I could have put cable broadband, or I could have put DOCSIS 2. Whatever it is, and then giving you the maximum. That would have probably been a little too much, though. I don't think the exam needs you to go into that level of detail with those. So if you answer DCEBA, for OC 192, 1000 base SX, one stream of 802.11ac, cable broadband, and E3, you're doing a pretty good job. So you're nicely done with that one. Let's do another exam, though. Let's go through another question. Now let's shift gears and move out of the performance-based question, and let's do a multiple choice question. This one deals with fiber. And the question is, which of the following would be the best way to reduce the number of fiber runs by half? How can we reduce the number of fiber runs by half? There's a number of ways to do it. I'm asking you which of the following would be the best way to do this. And by which of the following, I mean these 5 possible answers. Is it A, use single mode fiber? Is it B, configure your fiber links for full duplex? Is it C, use a QSFP transceiver? Is it D, use multi-mode fiber? Or is it E, use a bi-die transceiver? So one of those is going to be the best way to reduce the number of fiber runs by half. Now, when you get into this level of fiber runs, this is clearly an N10007 question. This was not something covered on the 006 exam. So you may not find familiarity if you're only looking at the 006 exam objectives. So if you are planning to reduce the number of fiber runs by half, which one of these would you use? If you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. That's obviously only available during these live events. That's not available on the replays. I'm so sorry. But it is available right now. Please don't answer in the chat room or give us any hints in the chat room. We want you to be able to see if you know the answer to these. So that might help you. This is one of those, I tried to put a few of those 007 questions in here so we can have some of the newer content that is there. What I did between the 006 and 007 is I went through all of the exam objectives. I do this whenever I start creating my course. The first thing I do is grab the exam objectives and I start to see what's new, what's the same, and what maybe is updated a little bit. There aren't many things that are updated a little bit. There's clearly a mix between old and new. But CompTIA really didn't create brand new sections. They really just added and updated existing content. And that's how I came up with that. It's really about 38% total. I've got the numbers in a spreadsheet where I counted every single topic. And I figured out which are new, which had been updated, and went through the entire thing just so we would know. Let's see how we did with this particular answer, though. Which of the following would be the best way to reduce the number of fiber runs by half? And we're not really sure. We've got kind of a tie for first and a tie for second, really. Our tie for first is B, configure your fiber links for full duplex. 30% of you said that. And D said use multimode fiber. 33% of you said that. We've got kind of a tie for second. 12% said use single mode fiber. 10% said use a QSFP transceiver. And 15% said use a BiDi transceiver. So which of these would be the best way to reduce the number of fiber runs by half? Well, one of the best ways to do this, if all you want to do is simply use your existing infrastructure or run fewer number of fiber transceivers, is you can use a bidirectional transceiver, a BiDi. These bidirectional transceivers are a lot different than the transceivers we're accustomed to using in the past. For those of you that work with fiber in the past, you have one run of fiber is for the transmit and one run of fiber is for the receive. So you can send the different types of communication down the proper line and they won't conflict with each other. But you need two fibers to be able to do that. One fiber for transmit, one fiber for receive. These bidirectional transceivers are able to go in both directions on a single fiber by using different wavelengths of light, which is pretty nice to be able to do that. Which means that now I can send, transmit, and receive over the same fiber. I'm reducing exactly by half the number of fiber runs I would need to connect a device together. That's pretty nice. It can also use the same number of fibers and suddenly you're doubling the amount of throughput available. That's another way to look at it. So whether you're reducing the number of fiber runs or you're increasing the amount of total available bandwidth by 2, kind of works the same way with these really interesting bidirectional transceivers and being able to use those. So if we look at our answers, the type of fiber we're connecting, whether it's single mode or multi-mode, doesn't really matter in this scenario. Multi-mode and single mode are simply a different way of communicating down the fiber, of sending the signal from one side to the other, but they effectively work exactly the same and they do nothing to reducing the number of fiber runs that you may need. So it's not A and it's not D. Configuring your fiber links for full duplex doesn't work that way either, because configuring fiber links for full duplex are effectively configured that way already. You really don't have half duplex on a fiber connection. So that would not be a scenario either. They're already running at full duplex. You have 10% of you said use a QSFP transceiver. The QSFP transceiver doesn't provide a reduction of fiber runs. It's another type of transceiver technology. The one we were looking for, the only answer here that really is the best way, is to use a BiDi transceiver. That would be E, only 15%. Got that one. I try to shoot for 50. I want half of you to get these right, which means I kind of want half of you to get these wrong, but I don't want to make these too easy. But I also don't want to make them too hard. So this is new technology that's been added to the N10 007 exam objectives, which have only been out for a couple of months. So this is something new. If you're studying for your 007, this is something you too now will have available. You won't get that one wrong. This comes directly from my N10 007 exam objective 2.1, my videos, and the video name on this is Network Transceivers. That's where that comes from. So no worries. We've got another question we can do. This one is one that applies both to the 006 and the 007 exam. And the question is that you need to query all of your routers every 5 minutes to gather performance metrics. Which of these would be the best way to accomplish this? We need to query all of our routers every 5 minutes to gather performance metrics. Which of these would be the best way to accomplish this? Would it be A, configure a script to SSH into every router? Would it be B, use RDP to gather the remote statistics? Would it be C, query each router with SNMP? Would it be D, connect the routers to the same IP subnet? Or would it be E, configure a port mirror on each router? So one of those. Those of you that are trying to find the bidirectional transceivers in your book, if it's not there, then they sort of missed that one on the exam objectives. It's absolutely in the CompTIA exam objectives. So follow the objectives, you'll be fine. Don't worry about what may or may not be in there. So you want to gather performance metrics. You've got a bunch of routers. Let's say you got 100 routers. And you don't want to do this so that you're constantly having to go to each device. And maybe you go to each room and you query it. Maybe you do it manually. Use SneakerNet. That's probably not the best way to do it. You need some automation. You need some way to do it. So what type of automation should we use? If you think you know the answer, don't mention it in the chat room. Don't give us any hints. You need to go to professormesser.com/QA, which I should probably put right there, and you'll be able to find the questions and answer them right there. Some of these I think you could probably look at and say, no, I wouldn't do that. No, I wouldn't do this. What's interesting about this, I'm looking at the answers, and I could possibly pick two of these. I think I could pick two of these that technically could provide that information. Technically. But that wasn't the question. Pay close attention to these questions that ask you. They want to know the best way to accomplish this. So you have to think about which one of these would be the best way. Let's see what you've thought of as the best way to do this. And then 58% of you have said to query each router with SNMP. 18% said configure a script to SSH into every router. 14% said use RDP to gather the remote statistics. And then kind of a tie for fourth. 6% said configure a port mirror on each router. And 4% said to connect the routers to the same IP subnet. So 58% said query each router with SNMP. But is that really the best way to query these devices for performance information? I would say so. SNMP is the best way. It's the most common way. It is the de facto way of gathering statistics on these devices. The simple network management protocol is able to query a device and ask it information. How's your throughput on that particular interface? How many errors have gone through that particular interface? We've got SNMP has different versions too. So depending on the devices and the SNMP management stations that you have, you may be using SNMP version 1, SNMP version 2, or SNMP version 3. And we can create some amazing bits of information with SNMP because we're gathering so many details. The management information base, which is effectively the database of all of the things that you could query on a device. When you get into some of these routers and firewalls and switches, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of metrics that you can gather. And you can create some pretty nice things that are there. There's some pretty nice technologies there. So do that and you'll know exactly. You'll be able to get some great reports from those. Yeah, version 3 has been around for a long time, but version 3 provides us with everything we need for encryption. So I don't know if there are any plans to really create a V4. V3 works great for most people that are doing that. So make sure you think about how that's used, and you may be able to set up your own management workstation and use SNMP. And in fact, those of you that did answer C, query each router with SNMP, those 59% of you got that one absolutely right. The other one that I said you could do, but probably not the best way to accomplish this, is A, configure a script to SSH into every router. You know, if a device doesn't support SNMP, that may be your only option, is to use Tickle or some other type of automated scripting language to be able to get into that device. You SSH in, you gather some stats, you maybe run a command to fill up the screen with stats, you scrape that screen, you parse it out, and now you've got the statistics you need. So that would be something you could do. That would work. But I asked you which of these would be the best. And that's definitely not the best. That's going to take some time. It's not foolproof. And why wouldn't you just use SNMP? It's built into the routers, built into almost everything that's an infrastructure device these days. Use RDP to gather the remote statistics. RDP does not use or allow you to do that. That's another difficult one. You'd have to RDP into the device, assuming that a router supports that, which probably doesn't, to be able to gather those. And then you need some way to gather the stats. I'm not even sure how you do that to make that happen. Connect the routers to the same IP subnet. That does nothing for gathering stats, although it may be useful for managing the device. If you have all the management IP addresses are on the same subnet, that might be helpful, but that's not what the question was. And E was configure a port mirror on each router. A port mirror will send packets, lots of data. Doesn't actually send any performance metrics. It simply sends raw data of what's going through the network. That's definitely not the best way to gather performance metrics. The best way would be C, query each router with SNMP. As you can see, there's so much information on this exam. I spoke earlier about my Network Plus course notes, and I have course notes available for the N10006 and the N10007, where I simply take everything from my videos, all the graphics, all the text. These are extensive course notes that are available there that have everything from understanding SNMP and those statistics, understanding BPDUs, understanding subnetting, information about topologies and proxies, and it's all in there. Everything. There is the Network Plus course notes for the 007. I've got them here on the screen. I should just pull that up on the screen so you can see that. Where did I put those? There they are. So here are the N10007 course notes. They're big. Let's see if I can show you a few pages of that. There's over 65 pages. What's the total? I think it's 66 pages of information. 66 in those course notes. This is the digital version. It has all of this information in it. But of course, there is a physical version as well. Mrs. Professor Messer likes the physical books. She says you need physical course notes. So I created a physical version of these two. It's a little bit extra to pay for the physical version because we do print them and they're shipped to you. This is made from a tree. That's where that comes from. If you do purchase, though, the physical version, you get the digital version for free with that. So you got to get both. It's a little bonus. But if you just want the digital version, $20, immediately downloaded. Every single penny from this goes back to keep all of this going. So, of course, all of my videos, all of my courses are available for you to watch absolutely free. Every minute of every video, there's no registration, there's no paywall. It's simply made available to you. But some people said, how can we help support what you're doing? I like to be able to give you something back for doing that. This is a good way to do it. So if you need some course notes, you don't want to take them yourself, it doesn't replace your book. It doesn't replace the videos, but it's a great way to study when you're finally trying to get ready to go through all of the details before you take your exam. It's all in there. Find out more at professormesser.com/NPCN for the course notes for version 6 and NPCN7 for the Network Plus course notes for version 7. So that might help you as well to have all of those there. And thank you for your support for those as well. We would not be able to keep this craziness going without your support there. So thank you so much. Let's get another question in. Here's another one of those, by the way, where I told you they're not going to ask you what something means. They're going to ask you what something is. Here's another one of those. Which of the following would be most associated with CCMP? Which of these would be most associated with CCMP? The possible options are A, multiple connections between switches that look like a single link. Multiple connections between switches that look like a single link. Would it be B, all traffic on a wireless network is encrypted? Would it be C, a switched network will be free of loops? Would it be D, a router will provide routing updates to all other routers? Or would it be E, a browser will check the validity of a web server certificate? I've got statistics in my head. So one of these would be most associated with CCMP. This is one of those, I don't think this one's too difficult. It's probably not even a two-step process, although you do have to think about what CCMP is and then see how that's applied to a particular technology. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Just plug in your answer there, and you'll be able to see how it's done. Yes, my course notebooks, I'm watching the questions go by in the chat room at professormesser.com/live. And it is a soft cover. It is not available at hardcover. Why do you need a hardcover book for this? Nope, that would not work. It costs enough to print on paper in color to begin with. So That's something I just pass through the cost of the printing just because it's so expensive. I just want you to have something that's an option available, but it is what they call perfect bound, which means the binding that's there is this soft cover book binding. There we go. I'm trying to do this. So there's the book. So it's not a spiral bound. It's the normal binding you would see in a paperback book, like a paperback novel, for those of you wondering in the chat room. That's what that is. Yeah, so if you purchase the soft cover physical version of this, you also get the digital version to download immediately for those. This question would be part of the 006 and 007 exam objectives. So this one would apply to both exams for this technology. Which of these would be most associated with CCNP? Let's see how you answered. How do we do? After much Googling, 52% of you said B, all traffic on a wireless network is encrypted. Let's see if that's the right answer, though, because 23% of you said that a browser will check the validity of a web server certificate. 14% said multiple connections between switches that look like a single link. 7% said a router will provide routing updates to all other routers, and 1% said a switched network will be free of loops. So that is one you have to think about. CCNP, you should be familiar with CCNP if you are at all familiar with WPA2. So that's exactly where that is and what that is about. I'm going and look just like that. Think about that answer real quick. Let me send a text message to someone who's at my door. Don't you love doing these things live and making those things available? So thanks for holding on, everybody. Those of you in the chat room, if you ever run into CCNP and wondering that's about, it's right there on the screen. It is the counter mode with cipher block chaining. So hopefully that is what you were able to see. I think in this case, this gentleman, I think the person who's delivering the thing to my house that I'm is doing that right now. This is the thing when you've got a studio set up. I'm the only one here. We don't really have anyone else here. So I'm managing the studio and managing this live stream as we go. There we go with CCNP. So if you are using WPA2, the encryption method that WPA2 uses is called CCNP, the counter mode with cipher block chaining message authentication code protocol. It's very long. But that is effectively when somebody says, what type of encryption is it using? That's what it's using. Now, within CCNP, it makes use of the very popular AES. So that is what's going on there with the AES. I'm going to step away, though, just for a moment, because all of my efforts are not working here, and I will be back in about 60 seconds, everybody. Stand by. There we go. Get the audio back in. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I know that's exactly how it always works, is if you are planning something, there's a live stream. Okay. It's just running down the street to make that happen. And we're back. CCNP. So if now that we know that WPA2 is associated with CCNP, we know that B is really the right answer. All traffic on a wireless network is encrypted. That was not a peep in the chat room going, oh, is there pizza? There is no pizza. That'd be nice though. Have some pizza during the study group. It would not be nice for you. It would be nice for me. But that's just how it goes. In this case, it was actually salt. Salt is what that was. So that all of that little gap in what we were doing was all about salt. Now, what is the multiple connections between switches that look like a single link? That's usually lag, link aggregation. And usually it's LACP is the protocol that is used in that particular scenario. LACP, not quite CCNP. Those are two different things, but you should absolutely be aware of both of those. Switch network would be free of loops, would be spanning tree protocol. STP, it's definitely not that. Only 3% of you answer that. A router will provide routing updates to all other routers. That's really dynamic routing. It's not really an abbreviation of anything. It's really just a way that you could know that there are ways to do that, to turn on different routing updates. And that might be OSPF or BGP or RIP, but those are very common to run into. A browser will check the validity of a web server certificate. Again, not CCNP. That's a certificate revocation protocol that's commonly used to do that. So that's why whenever we're looking at this question, the best answer indeed was B. All traffic on a wireless network is encrypted. We did pretty well with that one, didn't we? I'm checking in and seeing what's going on at the house right now. The chaos that ensues whenever I step out of this room never fails to entertain me. There is another question coming, though. Let's do one. I appreciate your patience. This question is about DNS. Here's our question. It says, you suspect that a DNS server may not contain the correct IP address for a server. Which of these would be the best way to verify this? You suspect that a DNS server may not contain the correct IP address for a server. Which of these would be the best way to verify this? Would it be A, netstat? Would it be B, ipconfig? Would it be C, iptables? Would it be D, dig? Or would it be E, TCP dump? One of these would be the best way to verify the fact that you're suspecting that a DNS server may not contain the correct IP address for a server. Could it be none of the above? It could be, I guess it could be none of the above, but in this case, I don't think it is. I think there is a good answer here. In fact, I think there's probably technically, I could see maybe two answers here. Well, maybe three answers that could be technically used to do this, but only one is going to be the best way. So that is whenever I start looking at what do we do with this? How does this work? What is the best way to make this happen? You need to understand these different utilities and command line functions. The answer should jump right out at you. You will often see this on the exam that you'll be reading through a number of different things. The answers really do jump out at you if you know your material. The exam does not really have two that could be absolutely correct. It really has multiples there that you would run into. So that's when you should think about too as you're going through this, is which would be the best way to verify this. Let's see how you did with this one. I'm going to click the How Do We Do button, and we can see that we have kind of a mix. We have 39% of you that said dig. We have 33% of you that says ipconfig. 16% of you said netstat. 10% of you said iptables. Only 2% said TCP dump. But really, TCP dump was one of those I mentioned that you could use TCP dump to do this. It would be the most awkward, difficult way to do it. But you could. 2% of you said, no, that's the one I would use. But that probably would not be the best way to verify this. If you want to see what's going on a DNS server, you're trying to figure out what type of configuration is happening on that DNS server, then you want to use either NSLOOKUP or dig. One of those two. You don't usually see dig on a Windows-based system. Did they include it with Windows 10? I'm trying to think back to my Windows 10 machine, if dig was on there or not. But the NSLOOKUP certainly is. So no dig on Windows 10. So thank you, Kevin answers in the chat room. NSLOOKUP allows you to perform queries against a DNS server and see what the results are. So if you're wondering, is a DNS server misconfigured? Does it even know the IP address? Am I able to resolve this particular server? You can use NSLOOKUP to do that. So that becomes kind of handy. You can also use dig to do this as well. And there are downloads you can get for dig for Windows. It's an executable available from Windows from the Berkeley Internet Name Daemon distribution. And you can find that at isc.org/downloads/bind, which is the Berkeley Internet Name Server daemon. Nice to have that in Windows, by the way, because dig does provide you with a little more, it's a little bit easier to use. You know, there's a little bit of idiosyncrasy to NSLOOKUP. You can find it, but it takes a little bit. And dig gives you a lot more information on the screen. You can see exactly what the query was. You can see the results of the query. You can see the information about what happened with that query. So that's why technically NSLOOKUP has been deprecated. The folks that made NSLOOKUP say, you should really be using dig now. And we're all moving towards dig to make that happen. So if you're running in OS X, if you're running in Linux, or if you've downloaded this and installed it on your Windows machine, you can run dig and get that information too. Comes in handy. So let's see how we did on this one. Those of you that answered dig, 39% of you got it absolutely right. Now, why wouldn't it be ipconfig? If you go to the server, you type ipconfig, you can see exactly what the IP address is of a server. But you have no idea what the name server has it configured for. Who knows what they put in the name server configuration? So that's why ipconfig will tell you nothing about how a DNS server is configured. Netstat's useful for seeing connections, both incoming and outgoing, among other things. It's a nice little utility, but it does not provide us with any information about a DNS server. IP tables is a way to filter information. It's a little firewall that you can install primarily on Linux-based systems, but IP tables doesn't help us at all with the DNS. That would not be the right answer either. And although TCP dump would allow you to gather all of the packets that were associated with a name services lookup, it really isn't telling you about the configuration of the DNS server as much as it's telling you when other people are querying the server what it's telling them. That's not really what we were shooting for. We wanted to be able to query the server and see what's happening here, find out this information. So that's why the correct answer in this case is D, dig. 39% of you got that one absolutely right. If you're someone who hasn't gone through these commands, you've not done a lot of hands-on, you may want to look at doing some hands-on. There's some great stuff out there to do this. The one I recommend is the one from GTS Learning, their live labs. I use these to be able to create a lot of the screenshots and step through the information. It's effectively an online set of practice labs that are something you can use anytime you want. It's all virtualized, so it's not on a rail. It's not like expecting you to click one thing and click the other thing and click the third thing and the lab is done. It's a full-blown Windows virtual machine. In fact, here's what it looks like. Here's me running some Wireshark in the virtual machine, which actually was not part of the lab that I was on, but I just wanted to run it. So if you have things you just want to try, you can run this in these virtual machines. It's always available. It runs in a browser. You don't have to install any special software on your workstation. It just works. It's pretty nice to be able to use this. And if you follow this link, professormesser.com/netlabs7 for the N10007 version, you get a special price. So you don't pay the full price on the GTS Learning website of $169. You get it for $109. So it's kind of nice to have that available. There is also links available on my website during the on the Network Plus pull-down menu for my recommendations for study materials. I think there's also NetLab 6 will take you to the N10006 version. So there's versions available for both. All available from those links. The GTS Learning folks are great. If you have questions about it, send them some messages. Ask them about what they got going on there. They got plenty of great things you can see on those pages that show videos of people using the labs. Sometimes could be a nice thing to have, especially if you don't have access to all of these systems or setting up VPNs or setting up certificate configurations or being able to SSH in or have all of these Wiresharks running. They're already there. They're already on these labs. Find out more, professormesser.com/netlabs7. My thanks to GTS Learning for the support they give of professormesser.com. Let's do another question. This next question is a question for you in 10007, folks, because there's a very particular set of objectives on the N1007 exam objectives which talk about IPv6, it talks about EUI 64, and it talks about MAC addresses. And this is something that's very common when you work with IPv6, is you will often need to perform a conversion from a MAC address to an EUI 64 address. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, this is a problem for this question, because this is a technique you need to know, not just for the Network Plus, for all of the other exams that you will ever take that have anything to do with IPv6. This is a very useful function. I'll explain once we're done with this how this works. Now, this is a fill-in-the-blank question, and I can tell by the number of answers I've received so far that you're trying to figure this one out. I got an answer. The answer was, I don't know. Sometimes it's good to know that too. There's a conversion process that goes from a MAC address to an EUI 64 address. Very useful. I got an answer. The answer was close. It was very close. The person that has put that in, the other one was very close. So close that you got these going on. You got the right ideas though. Another answer's come in, again, very close, but not quite there yet. You're very close to this. A lot of you've got the idea. You've kind of seen this process before and you kind of taken stabs at it. Good job. Nice. And somebody even said, I can't remember what part. There's a thing I'm supposed to do, and I can't remember which one of these I'm supposed to do it to. I get you. So good job. Good job at getting that far through it. This is something I've got a very quick way for you to remember how to do this. But you're right. There's something you're supposed to do to that MAC address, and then something you're supposed to add to it, and then you have the answer. In fact, I'm looking through some of the answers. Has anybody given me the right answer? This hard question, I realize that. This is 007 as far as this question is concerned. It's also a question you'll use if you go to anytime you're using IPv6 or tested on anything related to IPv6, you will use this as well. So that's not quite got the right answer in yet, but you guys are giving a stab. Let's go through this since we're sort of trying to figure this out with these MAC addresses. Yep, you're definitely, people in the chat room going, oh yeah, you're doing this in Cisco. Yes, you are. If you're doing IPv6, you're doing this. So what you've got is effectively a MAC address, which is an EUI 48 address, and you want to convert that to EUI 64. In your MAC address, you've got these two halves of it, each of them 3 bytes apiece, 24 bits each. And we're going to split it in two. Once we split it in two, we're going to stick FFFE in the middle. And some of you were sending this in to the answers. You were doing that. That's where those missing 16 bits are. Between a 64 length, 64 refers to the number of bits in the address. And EUI 48 to EUI 64, where do we get the extra bits? Where are those coming from? We're going to make them up. And we're going to just put FFFE. Those are the extra bits. And then what we're going to invert, this is the thing people are trying to ask or talk about when you were looking at this. There's a bit that you have to flip. You have to take, and this is difficult already because the MAC address is provided to you in hexadecimal, but now you need to flip a bit. So what do? Do you convert the hexadecimal to binary, flip the bit, and then convert it back to hex? Oh my gosh, do that in the exam a few times. That's not what you want to do. The bit that you're flipping, though, is a pretty important bit. It's a bit that is the unique bit or which is the local bit, or the administered bit, which is one that you would put in administratively. So you want to be able to flip the bits, but there's a way to do this. I've got a shortcut. Let me show you the process though before I show you the shortcut. So here is a part of an IPv6 address. These IPv6 addresses are massive. So here's the first half of the IPv6 address, the first 64 bits of it. What we're trying to do is take a MAC address, and here's the MAC address we were working with, and we want to split it up, put FFFE in the middle, and then put the last part in. But I told you we're flipping the bit. That MAC address is different than the one we were looking at earlier. So let me show you how we do this. We flip the bit. So what you'll do is create a chart. So you're going to list out every letter in hexadecimal. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F. That's the 16 characters in hex. Notice I put them in these groupings of 4 Put them in the same groupings that are there. And what you're going to be able to do is kind of flip them. Each one of these is going to flip. So this is your shortcut. You're going to look at the second character of the MAC address, and you're going to change it to whatever the other character is in this group. So if we took the MAC address we were just looking at, here's our MAC address, 8C2DAA4B98A7. We're already splitting it in half and sticking the FFFE in the middle. But we first have to flip that bit. We look at the second character, which is this C. We go over here and we see, where's the C? There it is. What's the other one that's listed with the C? It's an E. So that means that it changes to E as that address. So that's why the answer is going to be 8E2D alpha alpha FFEE 4B98A7. So that's where all those come from when we're trying to put it together. I don't think I even spelled out the entire thing on the screen, but if you take 8E2DAA, put FFEE right in the middle, and then finish up the rest of the MAC address, the only thing that really changes is that second character. Nothing else changes in there. So that comes in handy whenever you're trying to figure out this little chart. It's a very quick way. So you can look at a MAC address, you'll immediately know what it turns into. It is kind of hard after you start looking at this. It's like, how do I do that? In my video, which is section 1.4, assigning IPv6 addresses, I think I have about 5 or 6 examples, and we go through 5 or 6 of them. So hopefully you'll be able to very quickly do that. I guess you could do it the long way. You could take that first byte, 8C, convert it to binary, change the 7. No, why would we do that? Yes, you could. You could do that. But this is the quick way to do it. And on an exam, every second counts. And if you go to that video, I've got some examples. We run through 5 or 6 of those. And by the 5th or 6th one, you're like, I got it. I got it. I understand it now. So feel free to do that. If you get any spare time, you're trying to figure that out. That's definitely a 007 exam question. Let's do a 006 or 007 exam question right now with this one. Which of these devices would be the best choice for filtering traffic at OSI layer 4? Would it be A, WAP? Would it be B, a WAF? So A is WAP, WAP. B is WAF, WAF, for those of you listening on the podcast. C is a switch. D is a router. E is a firewall. Which of these devices would be the best choice for filtering traffic at OSI layer 4? If you think you know the answer, you can go to professormesser.com/QA and choose between A, B, C, D, or E. That's a little bit easier than doing a hex to decimal to hex or hex to binary to hex conversion, isn't it? I think it is. It's probably easier than writing down your quick chart there too, is to have those things available. The best choice for filtering traffic at OSI layer 4. Maybe you know. Maybe you've done this. Maybe you've filtered some traffic. Would it be a WAP, a WAF, a switch, a router, or a firewall? One of those would be the right answer. And those of you that are studying for the 007 or the 006 will probably be familiar with this. I think you'll probably do well on this one. I haven't looked. In fact, let's sneak a quick check of what you folks think. I think we're doing pretty well with this one. Let's see how we did. Let's flip back over and see, how'd you do? How did you do? Well, let's see. 80% of you have said firewall. If I had to ask a friend and they said firewall, 80% of you chose that one. 13% said router, 4% said switch, and a tie for fourth at 1% is both WAP and WAF. So a wireless access point and a WAF. Whenever you start looking, and you'll get this a lot from someone and me that worked a lot with next generation firewalls, and I'd go into a meeting and they go, we need a WAF. Like, that's not what I am. That's a web application firewall. It's a completely different thing than a next generation firewall. Then there's just firewall. We don't really even call them next generation firewall anymore, do we? They're really just firewalls. Everything is next generation now. When we look at that, and 81% of you said firewall, but is that the right answer? It absolutely is, because if you're going to filter at layer 4, that's a firewall. Now, these days, a lot of your newer firewalls are encrypting, or not encrypting, but they are filtering at layer 7 as well. But traditionally, we think of a firewall as being that layer 4 device whenever we're working with it. Sometimes you will see that certain routers can be firewalls at layer 3 because a router operates at layer 3. Sometimes routers can filter at layer 4. So does it become a firewall? Sometimes. Usually a router's a router though, and a firewall is a firewall. But you can do some very effective filtering with a router. And of course, if you're taking the N10007, there's a nice little section dealing with that type of filtering on a router and a switch, both a router and a switch, and being able to have those access lists on those devices. So you do go a little bit further into those access control lists on the 007 than you did with the 006. But obviously that is the correct answer. If you answered E, firewall, 81% of you did get that one absolutely right. That is the right answer. That is the one you should be working through. Now, where did I get all of these questions for today? I got them directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. You should get your hands on these objectives if you don't have them already. Some of you today were even mentioning there's something I didn't see in a book, so where would I get that information from? If it's listed in this exam objective, it could be asked on the exam. So this is a great checklist. If you have this list of exam objectives, you can just go through that list and check off everything you know. If there's something you don't know, you can circle it, circle back, do some additional study until you know that. And I usually tell people when they ask, how do I know when I'm ready to take the exam? I direct them to this list. Go to your exam objectives. And if you know everything that's on these exam objectives, you're ready for your exam. 95%. If you know 95% of this, you're ready for your exam. They're not going to ask you everything on this list on your exam. They will ask you a subset. So you obviously need to know everything. CompTIA tends to stay pretty close to these exam objectives. They tend to stay right in this list. If they go outside of these exam objectives, it's usually a question that they're asking you that does not really apply to the Network Plus grading. It's usually something they'll put in there just to see how well you do, having not learned those particular pieces of information, those materials. So make sure you go through this list. You can get to the exam objectives by going to professormesser.com/objectives or go to the Google machine, type in CompTIA exam objectives, download those. So make sure you download those and have them. It is your best bet for knowing what to study for your exam, and nobody else really gives this level of detail. Cisco doesn't do this. Microsoft doesn't do this. VMware doesn't do this. Nobody else does this. This is such a gift to you. Make sure you take advantage of it. We've gone through an hour, even with me running away for a minute or two. We've gone through an hour of content, of questions and answers, and we can do more, of course, in the second hour. Stick around. I'll open up the phone lines. I'll take questions from the chat room. We'll see if I can get some of the things answered that went by earlier. But we do one of these study groups every month. If you're watching this on the replay and you're well after June the 20th of 2018, which is when my next study group is, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar and be able to know exactly when the next event is going to be. I perform I dance for you every month for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus exam objectives. So you can, of course, go there and find out when the next one of those, or you can, of course, attend all of them. Well, you'll notice, however, in June, normally my A+ study group is the first Wednesday of the month, Network Plus is the second Wednesday, and Security Plus is the third Wednesday. Notice next month's a little different. So the 13th of June is going to be A+, and the 20th of June is going to be Network Plus. So if you like the Network Plus, that's where it's going to be. So, come back on the 20th. We'll do another one of these. I'll have more questions. I make these up as we go. Not as we go. I mean, I make them up beforehand, but I make them and put them in here. You can always catch up and find what's going on. There is a weekly Network Plus question I put out on every Tuesday on Twitter. So you can follow me on Twitter and get that at professormesser.com/Twitter. Don't forget about YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube, my Network Plus course notes. right on the website. Just go to professormesser.com. Everything's there. Don't forget about the discounts you get with the GTS Learning Live Labs by going to professormesser.com/netlabs. I mentioned earlier the calendar's there. If you ever want to know when I'm in this studio waiting for salt delivery, that'll be how you know that that's going to happen. Stick around for the next hour. We've got more questions coming from your calls and your questions that are in the live event chat on professormesser.com. If you have to leave, I appreciate you being here. We will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. I didn't give a secret word for CEU credit. I guess I should have done that in the first hour. So now we're in the first hour and 5 minutes, and our secret word, if you're watching this for continuing education unit credit, you can go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, and there's a Contact Us link there. In that Contact Us link, make sure you put your name, your email address. Make sure you put your email address there. I had somebody put asterisks to hide their email address sent to me, which means I can't reply back. They were asking a question. I need to send this back to you. So make sure you put your email address in there. And you want to put a secret code special word of the month. And this month, the special code word is SALT. The special code word is SALT. That tends to be what was on my mind on this particular study group. Send that to me. I usually get these sent out in a week. This last one's went out in about 2 weeks. But right now my queue is empty. Empty. So you should have already received a CEU from me if you are waiting for one. It is true. SALT, technically, you'll find plenty of SALT on the Security Plus exam. I don't know if there's any SALT on the Network Plus exam. There might be. There's a little section of security. I don't think SALT's in there. I think it's just in Security Plus. That would be the one. Yeah, you really would have to watch this to be able to get the SALT. Let's get the phone lines up and running. You can also ask questions in the chat room if you'd like to. You're more than welcome to do that. I'm going to start up my show right now. There's nobody else here, so this is kind of me starting the show up, trying to get things going. And I'll have the call-in line up in just, I guess I can put the call-in line up now because I have started this up. There's the call-in line, 855-785-7545. And I'll get, I need to call in because some of you are already calling in. If you're on Skype, it's a free call. Put a +1 at the beginning, 855-785-RJ45. That will get you there. Let me call into my own call. How does this work? Me calling in to the own, yep, it's all cloud-based these days. I don't even have a telephone here. And I type in a thing. I have to turn this off because I have to type a thing. And some of you are going to do a DMTF decode and figure out what I'm typing in. Did it ask me for the, it didn't, did it? Did I miss the whole thing? Let's see if I type that.
Enter your 6-digit PIN.
It did, see? It wants my 6-digit PIN, which doesn't make any sense at all, does it? Plus I have to know what my 6-digit PIN is. It is, I have to type this. Oh boy. I have to type the other and chew gum at the same time. And I'm in there. So there we go. Now I'm able to take some phone calls. The free Skype thing's kind of nice. It's got you don't use any Skype minutes. So +1, 855-785-7545. Questions from the chat room real quick before we go to the phone calls on there. Any plans on producing CCNA content? So CCNA routing and switching, I do have a course note, set of course notes. I technically built an entire course and created course notes from it, but I didn't actually record any videos for the course. It's one of those things about the course notes. It's nice to have a course to go along with it. So not at the moment. I don't have any videos for CCNA routing and switching, but I do have the course notes for CCNA routing and switching for the CCENT, which is the ICND1 I have available. I'd love to be able to do ICNT2 hopefully soon as well. Got to work on that. So question, should I try to transfer my 006 networking to 007? There is no transferring. There is right now, if you are studying for your 006, keep studying. There's no reason to switch. The only reason you would ever switch is if you're looking at the times and you're realizing I am never going to be able to do this by the end of August when the 006 goes away. At this point, that's the only reason you'd ever want to shift gears over to the 007 exam objectives. Doesn't really matter which one you take. You earn exactly the same cert. So that's one of those that might help. Another question before we go back to the calls. Would I ever consider creating anything for CySA Plus? That is the cybersecurity certification from CompTIA. Currently, there are no plans to do that just because I can't find any employers who are looking for it. It's one of those weird things with these new certificates that are out, although the CySA has really been out for a good bit of time now. It doesn't quite have the momentum that I'm looking for. There's lots of great content on it. There's lots of great things you would learn by taking that certification, but I need to pick and choose which one of these that I create, because it takes months to create a course. So I would hate to spend months creating a course that exactly one employer is looking for if I go out to DICE. And that's a literal truth. If there are more employers that are looking for it, then hopefully at some point I'll be able to do that as well. Let's go to the phone calls because we have some folks waiting. Thank you for holding. In the 212 area code, are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey there, I'm Jason calling from New York.
Hey, Jason.
Thanks so much for taking my call.
Welcome. What can we do for you?
I wanted to see if you could like explain the difference between RIP, OSPF, and BGP. I have a hard time wrapping my head around those different, I think, the routing protocols.
Sure. That's part of one of the problems with these dynamic routing protocols. First, those are used to make the routing decisions happen dynamically on a network. And it becomes very useful if you're someone who is wanting to set up some routers, and you're effectively telling the routers, I'm not really sure where all the routes are, but you routers all talk to each other, and then you'll know where all the routes are so that whenever a packet arrives and says, where should I go next, you'll know where to send it. It's really a decision that many people make when they're building out their networks is, do they want some type of protocol to do that automatically so that they add a new site or they remove a site, the network automatically knows what's changed? Or do they do everything manually through static routing where there is no extra protocols going over the network? There's no RIP, there's no OSPF, there's no BGP. You manually effectively program every single one of your routers. And if something changes on your network, you log into the router and you manually change that with your static routing. But that's why I think a lot of people love to use those dynamic routing protocols, because it not only makes things easy from a management perspective, there's some additional features that make it available, may be available in your routing protocol, such as the ability to fail over quickly or have multiple links running at the same time for redundancy. Those are some nice features, especially OSPF has some of those features available. The differences between them are subtle. You know, generally, when you're trying to architect a big network, you're trying to figure out what type of routing protocol do I put on this network, and you're trying to choose between EIGRP, RIP version 2, BGP, or OSPF. You know, usually there are some very fundamental decisions you're making about how the protocol operates that help you make those decisions. That's well outside the scope of the Network Plus exam. Understanding the nuances of RIP version 2 and understanding the nuances, well, nothing is nuanced in OSPF, or understanding what the advantages and disadvantages of EIGRP are at that very basic level are well outside the scope of the Network Plus. So I won't go into that level of detail, but generally on someone's internal network, they're either going to run RIP version 2, probably not, because it's kind of old and outdated, and there's some negatives about that. A lot of people are already using Cisco, and Cisco has their EIGRP, dynamic routing protocol. That's a good one that most people use because you effectively turn it on and it works. There's no extra configurations involved. If you have a relatively complex network configuration, you might internally choose OSPF. OSPF is an extremely complex dynamic routing protocol. I don't think anybody in the world really understands everything about OSPF. That's how complex it is. But it has some fantastic functionality that you don't get in EIGRP and certainly not in RIP. Things like having those multiple paths and being able to send information down multiple paths and use that sort of in a load balancing, but at a routing level, which is kind of nice. The other one you mentioned was BGP. And BGP is most often used as an external routing protocol, one that is used to connect you to the internet. Almost everybody who's connected to the internet is using BGP as that dynamic routing protocol on the internet. Almost never, I don't think anyone would ever, you would never use BGP on the inside of your network. It's almost exclusively 100% of the time used external. So that's sort of a quick overview of dynamic versus static and what some of the differences are between them. There's just so much detail in all of them to be able to get into it. But on my videos, I do give some high points. Here's why somebody might use BGP. Here's why somebody might use OSPF. Here's why somebody might want to use EIGRP. And those are documented there, so you can at least go through maybe a little bit more advantages and disadvantages of both than what I'm giving you over the phone. Hopefully that helps.
Oh, that was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. Whenever you start getting into architecting a network, you do run into these challenges. Are we going to statically route? Are we going to use a routing protocol? Which one do we use? Which ones are going to work best? And then, of course, you implement it and you find all the bugs related to that routing protocol you chose, and you wonder, should I really be doing that? That's always a challenge. Let's go to the 862 area code. Hi, caller. Where are you calling from? What's your name?
Hi, Professor. My name is Alan. I'm calling from New Jersey, actually.
Alan, welcome. Thanks for calling.
Thank you. Yeah. So, I'm actually was originally going to study for my Security Plus, but I went back to my Network Plus just because I want to really get a good understanding of networking. So, with that regards, I've actually downloaded and used the software like Cisco Packet Tracer,
sure,
and GNS3, which is another networking software.
Yep.
As we're studying along for the Network Plus, have you seen any kind of like useful, I guess, good use for those two softwares? Just kind of understand how things work and how to, set up routing, some routers and switches, and is there any helpful information that we can get from using all of those softwares when we're going for the Network Plus? Just to see what your viewpoint is, or if you know of any other software labs to use in addition to those two.
The Network Plus exam, and for those of you not familiar, the Packet Tracer is it's a piece of software that Cisco created to use primarily in their Cisco courses. And over the last couple of years, they've actually made the license and released it available to the public. You just need to register on the Cisco website, and you can download Packet Tracer. It's a utility or program that runs in Windows, and there's a Linux version as well. And what's nice about it, it's effectively a virtual environment that allows you to kind of drag and drop routers and switches, connect them together with your mouse, turn on dynamic routing protocols, configure IP addresses, log into the device at the command line, and operate it as if it's a real router. And I got to tell you, it's really good. It's an exceptional emulation of a real Cisco router. It's not running real Cisco routing code. It doesn't do 100% of what a Cisco router would do, but it does everything, well, almost everything you would need to be able to learn the nuances required for Cisco's CCNA routing and switching certification. So you can drag and drop a switch, put a bunch of switches on the screen, put a couple routers, connect them all together, try some IP addressing. It really is a fantastic program to use for this. I've used it extensively when I was building out my ICND1 course. As far as the Network Plus is concerned, it's way outside the scope of the Network Plus exam. You should be able to learn everything you need for Network Plus and never, ever touch anything that's in Packet Tracer or GNS3, which is an open source version of Packet Tracer that uses real Cisco code rather than being an emulated code. But if you're somebody who's already familiar with Cisco switches, you're already familiar with Cisco routers, and you're someone who's comfortable at the command line of those devices, and you're taking your Network Plus certification, and you run across these questions that talk about setting up spanning tree protocol or configuring link aggregation, you can do it in this virtual environment. So if you wanted some hands-on without ever having a real router or a real switch, Packet Tracer is a very viable way to do that. And somebody in the chat room even mentioned they do have an app for mobile platforms, but it's not even close to being the same thing you would run on the desktop. It's a really nifty utility. In fact, a lot of times when people are planning to get some type of hands-on for their Cisco exams, they're usually trying to make a decision between, do I get a physical set of switches and routers? Because you can buy these for $300 and $400 online, and they send you a whole pack of these outdated old devices that still work fine for learning, and they're great for your lab. Or do I just use Packet Tracer, which is free? And I like Packet Tracer just because it's so fast. I can answer a question I have very quickly by simply opening up Packet Tracer, dragging a couple routers, drag some switches, put workstations on both sides, send a ping command, tell it to go into slow motion mode, into freeze mode, where you can click a button and watch the packet as it goes between devices. You can perform a packet capture when that happens and view the packets. So in a way, Packet Tracer gives you capabilities that you couldn't possibly have with real devices. So you don't need it for Network Plus, but boy, it sure helps get some of those really weird topics that you run into in Network Plus and make them something very concrete and something you can touch and work with and hands-on that might help you remember it for the exam.
Sure. Yeah. And I agree. And one last thing, probably go Professor. I do have a strong interest in sort of ethical hacking.
Sure.
I know CEH is another popular cert, or I guess like more of an upcoming cert. If you find that getting Network Plus and Security Plus could kind of help, start the way for me to kind of get into that field and understand about hacking in that cybersecurity world.
That is something that I see a lot of people doing. And if you're someone who's really interested in that penetration testing, ethical hacking side of things, those types of certifications like CySA, like the Certified Ethical Hacker, like the some of the others that are out there. There's no OSCP or OSCP, which is also one that focuses a lot on that red team hacking type scenario. Those are interesting and very applicable certifications to teach you some of the basic skills you would need to do that. Now, of course, I always give my normal comment to that, my normal disclaimer, which is just a very, very small percentage of jobs available in IT security have anything to do with the red team, have anything to do with this type of ethical hacking or penetration testing. Are there jobs out there for those? Absolutely. It's just that the vast majority of jobs in IT security are the security administration jobs. It's the ones where you're administering security for an entire corporate network or organization's network. You're managing the firewalls, the intrusion prevention, the VPN connectivity. You're making sure that your two-factor authentication is working properly. You're implementing new VPN connections for people who are end users, and you're creating new VPNs externally. You're building out new infrastructures with new firewalls, and you're making sure they can implement that into your existing network in a fault-tolerant mode. It just goes on and on. There's SIMs and reporting and syslog, and it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. Those are the vast majority of jobs available in security. But I've run into some people who are really skilled and really interested in that red team, going out and being that ethical hacker. The jobs are out there. So if that's something you really are passionate about, definitely consider that. But I usually tell people, get that networking knowledge first, then move over and do the security piece, because security is really just overlaid on top of the network. If you don't understand subnetting, you don't know how IPv4 works, you don't really understand what's going on with IPv6, it's going to limit what you're able to do when you start getting into these devices and doing that ethical hacking. So that's sort of a long answer to a very simple question, Alan. Sorry about that.
Yeah, understand. No, it's okay. I definitely understand. It's definitely understandable. So, I appreciate the info, and I think once I start delving into a little bit of Packet Tracer and, once I complete my Network Plus, I think I can kind of go along. So I thank you for the feedback and the answer. That kind of cleared things out for me.
Perfect.
All right. I think that's all I had.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks again.
I appreciate you calling.
Yep.
Packet Tracer has a pretty big learning curve. So getting started with Packet Tracer, you're going to be stumbling around this thing for quite a bit. Cisco does have an introductory set of videos. They're very short. They take you through the high-level view of Packet Tracer so you can at least get up and running, get your first switch running, connect it with some devices so you'll know what's going on the screen. The hardest part about Packet Tracer isn't using Packet Tracer. The hardest part about Packet Tracer is understanding what's going on inside of it. So you connect up a couple switches, you do a lag, you connect up some routers, you do some routing protocols, you connect up some workstations connected to those, you change the VLANs, you do some trunking. It can be a mess to decipher what you've really put on there. So that becomes pretty handy. That's useful to have those there. Let's go back to the calls. The 614 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from? There you are.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
I'm Javier Renaulton, calling from Ohio.
Welcome.
And I had a question for you.
Sure.
So my question was, so I got your notes here for the CompTIA Network 006, and can you explain the difference between a broadcast domain and a collision domain?
I can. I've got a video on those two things. And in fact, it even makes it more complicated these days because we've got IPv6, which of course doesn't use broadcasts at all. This is something that people have been in networking a long time, are very sensitive to broadcast domains. We've got all of these devices on our networks, especially with IPv4. And one of the ways that some of these protocols work in IPv4 is they are in no way sensitive to other devices on the network. When they want to know something, they pull out a bullhorn and they blast it off to everybody else on the network saying, "Hey, I'm looking for Fred. Is Fred here anywhere?" And you're hoping that everybody will hear this announcement, and from that announcement, Fred will finally respond back. That's a very inefficient way to communicate. And now imagine doing that with multiple protocols, with hundreds of devices on a subnet, and now you've got a lot of broadcasts going, a lot of people yelling all the time on this network, and it creates a lot of noise, and it creates additional traffic, and it creates everybody has to stop what they're doing, listen to the broadcast, no, it's not for me, and they go about their business. So broadcast domains can be an awful thing to have to deal with. Broadcast domains are separated, though, with routers. So that's the thing you need to know. If it's an IP subnet is effectively a broadcast domain in the world of IP anyway. It's really something, if you really get down to it, a broadcast domain is a VLAN. And in the world of networking that we deal with, we generally put a single IP subnet on a single VLAN. So when you're talking about a broadcast domain, it's your VLAN that you're running on your local network, which is effectively a subnet. When you get into collision domains, and we still teach collision domains for some unknown reason, because collision domains effectively don't exist anymore. But back in the day, when we had hubs, it was a way so that everybody could communicate on this shared network. It was kind of the same scenario where everybody, if you want to send information out, you have to wait till nobody else is talking, and then you could send your information to someone else, and then hopefully they would receive it. Unless somebody tried to talk right in the middle of what you were doing. You're sending information, then somebody else tries to communicate, and you get what's called in Ethernet a collision, which is two devices communicating at the same time. It's a normal part of Ethernet. Has kind of a bad name because it has this name collision, has such a horrible context of things colliding with each other. The reality is that that's the way Ethernet works. It's a common form of communicating over a shared Ethernet network. So that's whenever we look at a shared collision domain, we're really talking about a half duplex network connection with multiple devices on it. And that's why we mention these days a collision domain. They really don't exist anymore. We really don't see them anymore. Technically, a single device connected to a switch over half duplex could be a collision domain. But a single device connected to a switch over a full duplex connection is not a collision domain because it's full duplex. There's no way to collide. So you get into these nuances with how we use the names of these technologies these days. But the best way to work out whether you're in the same collision domain is to see what device is being used. If it's a hub or if you're running in half duplex, then you've got a collision domain you have to deal with. You still have to know, for some reason, that history about collision domains. Even in the latest CompTIA Network Plus exam, even in the latest Cisco exams, they still have this need for you to understand collision domains. Now, if you're troubleshooting a network, there's a good reason for that, because you could run into problems that are often recognizable because the number of collisions will increase, even if you're on what you thought was a half duplex network. So there is some good practical knowledge in understanding that. But it's kind of an outdated topic because on your networks today, there's not going to be a collision domain. Or it shouldn't anyway. So hopefully that's a very high level explanation, one that sort of makes sense to do on a phone call. But I have a video where I break out both of those, collision domains and broadcast domains, and I show you the differences and I show you where they stop and where they start. And that might help you as well.
Yes, thank you very much. That was really helpful.
I appreciate the call. I have collision domain and broadcast domain are videos for both N10006 and N10007. So it really doesn't matter which one you're taking. You still need to know those concepts. And they're good concepts to know. You should be able to look at a packet trace and see collisions and see broadcasts and understand the differences on how to affect those, how to fix those, how to resolve those, or how to manage the fact that they exist. Is it bad? Is it good? You have to make that decision too and know how all those things work together. So hopefully that will be one you're able to work through and figure out those pieces. We got more lines open, though, if you want to call in. You can call in at 855-785-RJ45 or for free on Skype. No Skype minutes required. +1 855-785-7545. Back to the chat room real quick. Let's ask some questions about that. Some folks earlier, I'm trying to find the one that was there way earlier in the study group. So now I need to flip through and find all of those too, now that I've closed all my windows up on my screen, and get those there. So somebody was asking about Security Plus. By the way, there's no particular topic we're talking about here. These are open phone lines. So somebody was talking about the 501 exam, the SY0 501. Security Plus is kind of in that weird place that Network Plus is right now, where there are 2 Security Plus exams available. So the same thing kind of applies. The older SY0 401 will be retired on July 31st, and the SY0 501 is the latest version of the Security Plus exam. So if you have, I like the advice that was given in the chat room. If you have not started your studies yet, just study from the newest ones. That's a good best practice, by the way. And for someone like me, that it takes me a long time to study for an exam, an awful long time. So you may find that you don't want to put pressure on yourself that this exam is going away in July or this exam is going away in August. So instead, focus on the one that is going to be around for the next 3 years. Then you're covered. No matter what happens in your life, if it suddenly slows down and you can't take this exam as fast as you thought, you won't have to restart the process. So the 501 is pretty good. The 501 exam, I told you that the difference between the Network Plus exams was about 30%. The differences on the Security Plus exam are massive. Let me see if I can find the exact numbers. I've got the spreadsheet right here. Of course I have a spreadsheet. I live and die with spreadsheets. So if I look at the difference between the N10006 and the N10007 for Network Plus, there are 499 topics as I count them, which may be different than how you count them, but I count them from setting up training materials. There's 499 topics on the N10007 exam. It's about 500 topics. 171 of them are new to the N10007. They're not even covered at all on the N10006. That's just over 34% of the content on 006, on 007 is new from the 006. It's new material. So that's a lot of difference. From the 401 to the 501, we'll shift gears now to Security Plus. On Security Plus, there are 758 topics. On the 501 exam, 466 of them are new, which means the SY0 501, 61, just over 60% of that exam is new from the earlier version of the exam. 60%. That's a huge number. That's a huge amount of new topics. I was basically creating a new course. And that's why I tell people, do not study from the 401 and go take the 501. Don't do that. That would be a bad idea. Don't study from the 501 and take the 401. They have to match. make sure they match, because there's a massive difference between those two exams. Massive, being able to do that. Let's go back to the calls, and then we'll answer a few other questions that showed up in the chat room. Let's go to the 443 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, my name is Brad. I'm actually calling from Maryland in Baltimore. How are you doing?
Welcome, Brad. Thank you for calling. What can we do for you?
I do. Thank you for your time. I actually had a career question.
All right.
I am a computer field technician, and I actually enjoy what I do. But I'm a person that likes to, invest more into my education and to the position I'm trying to work. I'm still not sure what I want to do, whether it's security, Cisco, not sure. I'm pretty broad, just something in the IT industry currently. To give a short understanding of who I am, I have a degree, bachelor's, currently pursuing, associate's degree, currently pursuing a bachelor's.
Okay.
I just recently received my A+, currently investing in Net Plus and Security Plus at a minimum, hopefully within a few months. I do have a decent personal network with the IT, and I guess my question, sir, is with education and connections consideration, what are some maybe investive tips in the IT industry you would recommend as a whole? Is it variety, concentration, maybe like a hidden trade among the best of the best? I always like to hear the answers from some of the best people in the industry.
Well, I started one of my first jobs out of college. I got a degree in business management. One of my first jobs out of college was a remote technician job, where I was kind of a jack of all trades job. I was working for a computer company in South Miami, and we had clients under contract that included the Dade County. At the time, it was Dade County, now Miami-Dade County. So the county facilities were part of our customers. So I would go to those facilities, install equipment, repair equipment. At that time, it was very basic because it was early on in the kind of the IBM PS2 desktop lines, but it made it very easy to do warranty repairs. You could swap out a hard drive very quickly. You could swap out the motherboards very quickly. So I would show up, do the swap. Sometimes people would have a printer delivered. There wasn't a cable. That was back in the days when we didn't have wireless networks. So I'd have to deliver a cable. That was my technical job, was getting in a car and driving a cable and plugging it in. There's the technical part of it. But those types of jobs, they're a lot of fun. And I enjoyed that job too. And you got to meet a lot of great people. But I wanted a job where I could go one place at the beginning of the day, work there all day, and I wouldn't have to drive around all of South Florida all day, every day. And I focused at the time, my focus there was sort of learning everything I could about what I was doing. And I realized the people I was visiting, whether it was corporate customers or government customers, needed people with that type of knowledge. So I used, you mentioned people networking, and it's such an important part because I would see certain people a lot. I would visit certain customers a lot, especially large corporations that had 1,000 computers. You would show up often needing to swap out something or another. And you got to know those people and meet them, and they got to understood what you knew, what I knew. And then it was very easy when you got to a point and needed to find a job, and you could ask them, hey, I'm in the market. Are you guys planning to hire? Do you have any open positions? Can I fill out an application? And there was no relationship or any type of contractual issue between me moving from a seller of the devices to one of the customers, which sometimes can be an issue, which worked out great. There was an open position. They hired me, and I started doing work in a corporate environment. That was more of a corporate help desk. But you mentioned, I really don't know where my next step is going to be, or I don't know, have a big plan. I don't think any of us really do in this industry because things change so much. I got there just wanting to be on the help desk. From there, I saw someone using a sniffer, and I thought, that's amazing. I can see the packets going over this network. Tell me more about this. And I got into networking. I realized that's really interesting to me. Tell me more about this device. Moved from there, and once I became an expert in this, and you were talking about what do I do to really make a difference, find the one thing you're really interested in and become an expert in that thing. It can be a very focused, very specific topic or type of technology. For me, when things really started to click is when I really became an expert at reading the sniffer, at reading and understanding the packets that were going over the network, because you see everything. And I could answer questions that no one else could get an answer for. Mrs. Professor Messer is a nurse. And at the time, she was becoming very adept at reading 12-lead EKGs. So she could look at a 12-lead and tell you exactly what's going on in someone's heart. And I said, well, I got the same thing, except I can tell you exactly what's going on in this network because I've got this wide area network, this token ring, or this Ethernet sniffer available. So those are the types of things. And once you do that, you'll realize there's a ton of people out there that need somebody very skilled with that particular type of technology. And I moved from the corporate environment into ultimately working for the company that manufactured the protocol analyzers, which opened up a whole nother world of performance management, of understanding SNMP, being able to do reporting. And from there, it evolved into ultimately into security. I didn't know that it was going to go that direction. Nobody really does. You kind of just go with where the flow takes you. These opportunities that show up are opportunities you would have never realized were even there, but there they are. So keep doing the things you're doing. You're on the right track. You've got the right type of education in your background. You're doing the right things there. You're getting the right type of certifications. You're not blowing up the certification side without having the practical experience to back it up. Sometimes people make that mistake. If you're going to your Microsoft user groups and you're a great part of the world, you're in a great geography to go to these user group meetings because there are some big players in your area for Cisco, for Microsoft, and they're looking for good people. Those are great places to network. And you need to be able to have some of that niche knowledge, whether it's something you're doing on a lab that you're building at home, or it's something that you're kind of learning in your normal day-to-day where you're becoming an expert in that particular piece of technology. So I think you're on exactly the path you should be going. Just keep doing more of where you're going and start looking for those opportunities and those open doors. You'll be surprised how many happen to be out there.
That sounds really good. Actually, my father made basically to sum up what you said. We've had a lot of conversations about the security industry and about IT, and his quote he always likes to say is, an expert doesn't take a lot of, I don't say not too much effort as people think. An expert is just knowing a little more than the person next to you, then you become the expert. And I think that really does sum up what you said. And I do thank you for that.
He is right on the money. Thank you for calling, Brad.
Thank you, Professor. You take care, sir.
And that is true. I'll give you another example. I talked, somebody in the chat room was talking about that remote technician job I had, because in the last study group I was talking about when I went to jail with that job. You'll have to go listen to that last study group to do that. But one of the things that I found when I got into the corporate environment, I've told this story before, but it talks about being an expert in certain things, is that they had these old gateways that allowed people on the network to be able to connect to the mainframe. Now, normally back in the old days, you literally ran a piece of coax from the mainframe, down the hall, down the multiple 7 floors of this building, down to somebody and connected it to a terminal, and they were able to connect to the mainframe. Well, that obviously is not very flexible. You're running coax cable to connect to them. It's just not a good way. And we had everybody on a network. Why couldn't you use TCP/IP, or at the time IPX, to be able to connect people from their already connected workstation to the mainframe without using coax? Wouldn't that be easier? So you go through this gateway to make that happen. The problem is the gateway would crash multiple times a day, just completely fall over. And we had multiple gateways. People would be working on the mainframe and then they would go down. That obviously not a great way to run business. So one of the things they told me is you're going to become an expert in these gateways and you're going to fix these and get these up and running. And that's what I did. I got the manuals. I read through all the manuals. I knew nothing about this stuff, by the way. I had no idea how these gateways worked. I saw them, and I saw people saying a lot of filth, flarn, filth whenever they were working on them, but I had no idea what they were. So I got into go, okay, that's what this is. It's really fear of the unknown. That is the biggest hurdle we often have to get through. So I read about the manual. Then I called the company and I said, let me talk to tech support and say, I've got this problem. This is what's happening. What should I do? What are some best practices? And they said, here are some configuration things you should look at, basically from the type of configuration you have, the number of people connecting to the gateway, the type of connections that are in use. This is what I would recommend you doing. Now, at the time, we were literally booting most of our servers from floppy disks, and that was normal, by the way, at the time. So I had my 3.5-inch floppy disk, and I would create a new configuration. We'd boot up a gateway, and we'd run it for a while. And we found that after a while, I got a configuration that it went down once a day to one that finally didn't break at all. You know, upgrade the code, change a configuration setting, change the way this one's working with the memory, add a new memory manager into DOS, you know, get all these things working. And we got it. So finally, after a couple of weeks, now really more than a couple of weeks, we got these machines running and they would just run reliably. They would not crash anymore. I became the expert in these. I didn't know more than anyone else who could have read the manuals, called somebody in tech support and said, hi, I'm a dummy, help me. And people are more than happy to help you, by the way, when you say things like that. A lot of people in this industry, for some reason, pretend they're an expert and they don't get the type of support they're hoping for. But if you approach this and go, I have these servers, they are crashing every day, and I am an idiot. And guess what? I'm the guy in charge. So how can I fix this? Okay, let's get you going. They're more than happy to help you and tell you about how these things work. So like I said, I didn't do anything special to become an expert with this, but because you're the one who knows more than anyone else who's there, you're now the expert. And sometimes that's all it takes. Back to the calls real quick to the 339 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller.
Hello?
Hey, sorry for keeping you on hold so long. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, my name is Emmanuel, and I'm calling from Egypt, from Cairo.
Thank you. What can we do for you?
Actually, I was reviewing your videos and so on, but I'm already certified with Microsoft, but I'm getting a bit of confusion about some announcement of companies that needs to get a server administration with Unix or Linux.
Sure.
Actually, I don't understand. Many companies is relying more than in Linux and Unix environment more than Microsoft, which get me some confusion. I already got my certification in Microsoft, and I'm going on to study your videos and other stations also on YouTube. But I get a surprise that many companies is asking about Unix or Linux, and also confused between Unix and Linux, because if a company will run a Unix or a Linux server, do the end users inside the company is going to use Windows anyway. I think you will not teach your employees to get through a very I don't need to know. I don't need to say an uncommon operating system, but it's Microsoft more dominated in whole countries and in your home and your office. It's very easy to use Microsoft with its graphical environment and so on. So I don't understand exactly why many companies is relying on Unix and Linux servers and not operating with Microsoft. And another question, and I will end it with the Server Plus. I have no idea about this certification, and do I need to study the Server Plus while I have a Microsoft server and domain name environment familiar and my certification, or not? I need, if you can clear me this point, what more Server Plus will offer me.
Well, let's start with that second question first, because I think that's a quick one to answer. But if you're someone who's already familiar with Microsoft, especially if you have a Microsoft certification with Microsoft Server 2012 R2 or the newer versions, that's what a lot of companies run as their server environment. So if you already are familiar with those, there's not a lot that the Server Plus certification is going to help you with. If you're someone who's never even touched a server before, you've never had any type of experience working with Microsoft Windows or Microsoft Windows Server, then perhaps Server Plus might be a good way to learn the basics, because it is a very basic certification. But if you've already earned one of the Microsoft certifications, which are not simple certifications. These are very complex certifications from Microsoft. If you already got one of those, you'll probably have everything you need to kind of jump over the Server Plus. But I will say that you can always check job postings in your area. Different countries and different geographies have an emphasis in different places. There are some geographies that really don't care about your certifications. There are others that really want you to have A+, and others might not really care if you have A+ or not. It may be the same thing with Server Plus. So check that part in your area as well. Now, as far as Linux is concerned, this is sort of a remarkable thing that we've run into in our industry. Linux being a free technology that has become very, very viable and is used quite a bit on many different environments. And you see a lot of companies will be asking for Linux. People are familiar with Linux. And that's because I would bet pretty much every company of any size in the world has at least some Linux running in their environment. It might be for their web server. It might be for a database server. It might be for a backend process that's being used. It's very common to see this being used as a server or providing a service on the network rather than being used as a workstation. And there are people that do use Linux as their workstation in many corporate environments, but you don't commonly see that at all. To your point, very commonly as a workstation, primarily you see Windows being used. So you already have some Windows knowledge. You already have Windows certifications. Those are absolutely going to help you when you go looking for a job, because people need to know that the people they're bringing in are familiar with one of the most popular operating systems that are being used on their network. But there's also, these companies are also got a Linux machine that's being used for voice over IP, or it's being used for those services I mentioned earlier. You've got to have administrators that understand Linux. So you run into that as well. And then, as you also mentioned, there's kind of this other arm of folks that are running Unix, where you have an RS-6000 from IBM, or you have some of the Sun technologies still running that are Unix devices, that are very similar to what you would find in the Linux world, but it's still not Linux. Maybe it's OS X. There's another example of a Unix type platform and being able to use it. So all of those things are used in different places in different companies. In my example, let's look at this company. So right now in Messer Studios, if you're on my website at professormesser.com, I have a number of Linux servers that are my web-based front end. I've got Linux databases in the back end. There's probably even Linux that's being used for some of the other functions that I'm using. I'm using as a caching server. So there's Linux that's using for that. You're also watching me over this switched video configuration, and this is the console that I'm using up here in my upper left for my video switcher that's running in Windows. The operating system I'm using in front of me is OS X. That operating system is it's primarily a Unix-based operating system. It's BSD-based. So you run into these situations where even in this single room, I'm using all three of those operating systems, and I'm using the strengths of those operating systems to do these things for me. So that's where you find these companies that are not only looking for people familiar with Windows, they're looking for people familiar with Mac OS, they're looking for people familiar with Linux, and in some cases, people familiar with Unix as well. So it's just going to depend where you're going and what they're looking for. You will sometimes find that certain knowledge of operating systems might allow you to get a larger or higher starting salary than other operating systems. But that again depends on the geography and just how much people are using of those operating systems. It varies widely. And I think if you're planning to get into a network administration or server administration, these days you can't just limit yourself to one operating system. You need to know how Linux works. You need to know how to administer that Linux operating system. It might also help if you know how to use OS X in Apple's environment. It might help you to understand the nuances of Unix operating systems and how those operate. So each one of those has a place these days. You really can't limit yourself if you're planning to do anything above a help desk, because now you're dealing with multiple operating systems across multiple types of networks and ultimately layering security on top of all of that. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for calling.
Absolutely.
That's always a challenge, though, and I see this in people are advertising these jobs. Is they often want one person who does all of these things. That's a little more difficult to find. You have to really spend some time on these operating systems and understand them. If you haven't done any Linux, it's so easy to download a live CD, a live boot ISO, and boot that inside of a VM manager like VirtualBox, which is free, and you got Linux on your desktop. And those are things that can really give you knowledge that will help you when you're ready to do something different in this industry. Really helps quite a bit. Let's back to the calls. 607 area code. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Professor. My name is Nihar, and I'm calling from upstate New York.
Oh, welcome. What's your question?
I have a question about the A+ certification.
Sure, fire away.
So I'm actually studying. I'm actually reading a book and taking exams like chapter by chapter.
Okay.
Once I'm done with one chapter, and then take a test. So I'm doing that way. So that way I can know what I have earned, what kind of knowledge I have, and checking my skills.
Good.
What I know in that chapter.
Sure.
So now my question is, like once I do that test, I get like 77 or 78% in that chapter. So like I'm trying to aim like 80% or 85%.
Sure.
So like, can you give me some tips how to get that?
There's really, I think, whenever you're studying for any certification exam, there's a multi-pronged approach that I will usually take, and one that I recommend. You're already using some of these prongs already. So the first one is get a good book. There's no other form of knowledge transfer that has such density associated with it than a book. You can read and pull more information from a book in a very short amount of time than any other type of studying process. So make sure you get a good book. Sometimes you may want to get two good books, depending on whether you like the way the author is writing, or maybe you just want another opinion. But make sure you get at least one good book. The second one I always mention is to perhaps watch a video series. That's a little self-serving. I recognize that, but it doesn't have to be my video series. I think watching somebody perform these commands at the command line, watching somebody plug these things into a motherboard, or visually seeing these interfaces and these different cables can be very useful. So there is some value into a video course as well, and being able to take advantage of that. The other one you're taking advantage of that I list on my third most important thing you should have when studying for a certification exam are a set of questions, so that you know, am I learning everything I need to know? And it's hard to find a good set of questions, but the more questions, the better. It allows you to really test yourself and see how much you're retaining from those pieces. And the fourth piece, and the one you didn't mention, but it's just as important with A+ as it is anything else, is getting good hands-on. Getting as much hands-on as possible, whether it's for the 901, taking apart a computer and really holding the parts in your hand, and there's something about touching the components and visually holding them that helps solidify those thoughts into your brain. It helps probably even more in the 902 exam, where it's so focused on operating systems. If you've never touched a Mac OS operating system, it becomes difficult to get the concepts across to somebody. But if you're somebody who has played around with Time Machine and you've actually restored some files from it, then that's a particular topic that you'll know very easily when the exam comes along. So focus on those four things: a good book, a good video series, some Q&A, and a lot of good hands-on. If you've got all four of those, you'll be able to fill in those gaps that perhaps you're missing when you're taking those exams. And sometimes it takes more than one read, or more than one book, or more than one set of questions, but eventually you start putting all of those pieces together and it makes a lot more sense.
Okay, so I'm actually doing like, I already have a good book for CompTIA A+, so I'm good on that. But what's my next plan is, like, let's say if I'm done with hardware part, so I would like to do I would like to study hardware, and then do the test. So that was my next plan, and then do networking, and then do the test for that. So, I just want to make sure that am I on the right path?
You are on the right path. What you won't find on like the 901 exam, it does follow a pretty good path through those exam objectives. You will find the last section of the exam, which is on troubleshooting, really goes through troubleshooting all of the things you just learned. So it helps if you go through the first, the second, if you go through hardware, then networking, then you finally get down to that last section on troubleshooting. It's going to be about troubleshooting the hardware and troubleshooting the networking and troubleshooting the printers and other devices that they list out in the beginning part of that exam. So the more time you spend really understanding what do I need to know about these technologies, the better off you're going to be when you get down to the troubleshooting part, or else you're really going to be lost when it talks about troubleshooting these laser printers. And unless you already know how a laser printer works, you're not going to be able to troubleshoot it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Okay. And yesterday I was reading a chapter which was power supply, and I was confused between what is rail and multiple rails. I was actually confused there. I searched videos online and tried to figure out that way. And then I'm like, oh, there is a good way. Maybe you can explain me a little more.
Sure. And you see this with the most recent iteration, the most recent technologies that have to do with power supplies and how they operate and having these rails available. One of the best ways I saw it explained to me was that it helps a lot when you get into a scenario with power where there's some type of massive pull of power that you're using. You're using a lot of power on your computer. And these rails are effectively running the power. I'll find the exact details. I'll bring it up on my screen so that others can follow along with what we're doing. You see this often with these power supplies that might have a rail that would be running 12 volts. So if you've got a power supply and it's a single rail power supply, it has let's say a 12 volt rail. It's got one single circuit on that power supply that's providing 12 volts, which is fine. In fact, it functionally works exactly the same as a power supply that has multiple rails of 12 volts. You can think of it as a separate circuit. If you think about your house and how you have different circuit breakers for different parts of your house, it's a very similar idea in design with these power supplies, so that you have a second or multiple 12 volt rails inside of the power supply. And so you've got different devices maybe plugging into different 12 volt circuits on that particular power supply. Now, let's say that you've got all of these devices in your computer and you have really overloaded. You added a new video card, and now you're putting a little bit too much strain on this particular power supply, and you're effectively overloading the power supply. Now, if you've got a single rail, usually that means you're destroying the power supply. It's not even in use. There's going to be smoke and it's going to be a problem. But if you are overloading a single one of those circuits, you effectively switch off the power supply. You're effectively tripping the circuit, if you will, except it really trips it for the entire power supply, and it protects the power supply from failing completely, from destroying itself from the inside. What it usually does is go, whoa, let me turn everything off now because we've got an overload, and I can contain that overload because I have multiple rails providing that 12 volt power across all of these systems. So that's the primary. There's lots of other nuances to rails and how they are used inside of power supplies, but that's sort of the bigger picture of why you would choose a multi-rail power supply over a single rail.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you very much for answering my question.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. That's when you get into the A+, you sort of have to know all of these things, if only for troubleshooting, because you're going to get into these scenarios where you have to troubleshoot all of these different problems with power and being able to work through all of those different ones. And when you get to the troubleshooting section of the 22901, it's absolutely something you will need to know. Back to the calls. 571, you've been holding for a long time. Thank you for holding. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Imbaba. I'm calling from Virginia.
Well, thanks for calling. What's your question?
My question is, last time I tried to buy from your notes, like the Network 00610 and Security Plus 401.
Sure.
But it was so hard for me to go on because it keeps asking me username and password. I just give it my username and password, but still keeps asking me like verify reset or stuff like that. But I couldn't buy it.
Well, one of the things that I do a little different on my site than perhaps other places you would go is when you purchase any of my course notes, these are digital products, so they're downloadable. So this is really for anybody else who's listening in, is that I have you create an account, and then when you purchase the course notes, they're just made available in your account, and you can log in with your login credentials and download your set of course notes. This also helps you in the future if you buy A+ course notes, and then you pass your A+, and then you might come back and you want the Network Plus course notes. You only need to log into your account to purchase those course notes, and now you've got all of the products that you've ever purchased are in one place for you. So it's a way to make it easy for you to keep everything organized. It's also a very easy way for me to provide you with a way to download these because you paid for it. There should be some easy way to get to it. And what's nice about that is if you download it and then in 3 months your computer crashes, you only need to log into your account again to download them again. So you can download them as much as you'd like. You bought them, you should have access to them. If you're having problems doing that, and it sounds like here you might be having problems logging in, there might be an issue with your account. The account may have been disabled for some reason. That's one of the things that sometimes can happen. You can always, the top or the bottom of my website, there's a link for Contact Us, and that's really to contact me. And you can tell me the problem that you're having. You can give a description of, here's my username. You can give me a screenshot of the error that you might be receiving. And I can usually step through my logs compared to what you're seeing on the screen. And together we can help troubleshoot what that problem happens to be. I try to make the process as seamless and easy and error-free as possible. But occasionally sometimes these problems do crop up. So you're more than welcome to send me a note there. If you already have an account, this is for other people that may already be logged in. There's an entire help desk tab available to you. You can open up a ticket there. That informs me immediately that you need some assistance, and I can help you on that side too. So a couple of ways. Whatever makes sense for you, you find the best way to send me a note, and I'll be glad to help you with it.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for calling. And that should be something we're able to work through and figure out really, really quickly. Usually it's something that I've messed up on my side and it's causing a problem for you. And I like to fix those problems as quickly as possible so that, because it's hard to keep the lights on if nobody's able to buy anything. I found this. That's my little business tip of the day for you. For those of you planning your own business, people really need to be able to purchase product for things to work properly. And I really have worked to make it as seamless as possible. If you go to my website, there's always things I'm trying to optimize. I'm in the process of another optimization project right now. So it may be something as simple as the type of credit card method that people use. If for people that are in this business that are integrating credit cards and you've got internet access and all of these skills that you learn when going through A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, you start to use when you've got these Linux configurations, you've got firewalls that these have to work through. It's all running on different operating systems. It really becomes a little bit more of a challenge. In the chat room, some people are asking about the GTS Learning study guide materials. I like the GTS Learning books because first, I use their books when I'm building my courses. They generally get their books written first or somewhere within my construction process of these courses. So I like their books because they are straight and to the point and they stick to the topics that you need to know for the exam and they don't go outside that scope. So whenever I'm looking for a book, and that's what I do. There are a lot of other books out there. There's some books out there that will take you through the history of computing from the time of dinosaurs, and they'll give you a lot of background of some of these things. That's valuable too. But I'm the kind of person that when I'm studying for a certification, let's not worry about the stuff that's not in the cert. Just tell me what I need to know. And after this is over, I'll circle back and learn the things that I missed along the way. So that's one of the reasons I like the GTS Learning study guides. The question in the chat room, though, is, are they in the exam objective format? Now, if you've watched my videos through the years, you'll notice all of my videos are numbered and are in order to correspond with CompTIA's exam objectives. I do this because it makes it easy for you to find the topics that you're looking for if you're trying to learn this material. However, CompTIA's exam objective order is not always the most conducive to learning. If I was going to build the exam objectives for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, all of them would be in a very different order. They would be completely different. In fact, the very first A+ course I ever created was one for the 600 series A+. So this is quite a number of years ago. Well, I created that course in the way that I would write a book. So when I started putting the topics in, I started with the fundamentals, and I built on those fundamentals through the video series. Well, people would say, well, I can't find what I'm looking for in the videos. That doesn't link back to the exam objectives. So from that point on, I have put all of my videos in order of the exam objectives. But I got to tell you, it's just a bad order. It's not a great order. And I recognize that. But I can't, if I do it another way, you won't be able to find anything. So it's a lose-lose for me. I can't do it in a way that's going to be perfect for everybody. What you're going to find is none of the books anywhere follow the same order as the exam objectives because it's a bad order. They know too. This isn't a secret. They know it's a bad order as well. But what most books do, including the GTS Learning books, is they put either at the beginning of the chapter or they have a cross-reference sheet somewhere else in the book that show you chapter 2 relates to exam objectives 1.4 and 1.5. So they cross-reference for you the chapters and where they fit. I think the GTS Learning books do a pretty good job of that. They do it in the chapter itself. So at the beginning of the chapter is a page that says, in this chapter, you're going to learn these topics, and these topics are associated with these CompTIA exam objective numbers. And what makes it easier in the GTS Learning books is they've already integrated my videos into it. So when you watch a section in the GTS Learning book, there's either a QR code where you can run the video right from your mobile device, but if you're reading it from a PDF, you just click on that and it launches my video that goes through that particular topic. So they've already figured out the order of the videos. They took all of my videos. We share a spreadsheet. I love my spreadsheets. So I got a spreadsheet shared with GTS Learning right now. And they go through the spreadsheet. They see exactly what topics I have for each video. And they see the links that I have to those YouTube videos. And they link them all together in their book in whatever order their book is in. So that's kind of a nice thing too. They don't need you also trying to figure out what video goes with it. They just put it in there and now you're covered. And they try to put every single video in the right place in their book, which sometimes is hard to do, but they do a great job of it. So that's whenever I start looking at the GTS Learning stuff, that's one of the things I like. I've worked with them for so long that we've just got a system now. They're great to work with. So if there's ever any feedback, any messages, any questions, any thoughts, they're immediately accessible. And they want to hear those things. So it's nice to work with somebody like that. They want to build the highest quality training products they can build. And it's been great being able to integrate my videos into those as well. So I think it's the best of both worlds from that perspective. Okay, some other questions in the chat room. There were some at the very beginning. So I'm going to go back quite a bit. When we were talking about salt. It's always funny to go back over this and figure out, what is that? What were you doing with those people? We've talked about testing strategies. So somebody was asking earlier on about testing strategies for someone who may have failed the exam. And this happens. We've all failed a certification exam. I've certainly failed my set of exams. So that's whenever I start getting into figuring out how do I get past these failures. One of the things that's incredibly important, and for some reason, I get so many stories about how people don't get access to this. Whenever you finish a CompTIA exam, whether it is one that you passed or whether it's one that you failed, you get a printout. There is a printout that shows you what your score was, and it tells you every topic that you missed. Doesn't tell you the question, doesn't give you the answers, but it tells you you missed this many questions in topic 1.2, configuring this thing. You missed one question in topic 4.1, understanding that thing. So at the end of the exam, you're handed this amazingly important document that tells you exactly what you should be studying, exactly places you could get better. And for some reason, a lot of these testing centers, our printer's not working. Yeah, we don't have it. Bye. That's not a good answer. Got to tell you, I need that information. And you will never get it if you leave the building. There's no way for them. They've not made a way for some reason for you to get that in an email. They don't provide it to you in some other form. For some reason, there is this critical point when you walk out of the exam room that if they don't have a way to get that piece of paper to you, it's lost forever. So I highly recommend if they say, "Oh, we don't have a printer, it's not here," that's not going to work because they are required by Pearson VUE to have a working printer, or they can't be a Pearson VUE. So the next step for you is not to leave. It's to, oh, great, who can we call at Pearson VUE right now while that's on your screen for you to be able to give that to me? Can I take a picture of your screen? Can we print it out as a PDF? Can you email it to, what can we do? Is there another printer in this entire building that this could be printed to? Let's get somebody on the phone and get that information. It's so valuable. Don't leave without getting your hands on that piece of information. It's also good if you pass the exam. You're going to miss something on the exam. You're not going to get a perfect score. So what did I miss? What topics should I really try to get better at? That will give you some good information there as well to have those things. It's really an important part of having a knowledge of being able to make that next step. And if you fail, that's just incredibly important intel. Now, your exam, the next time you take the exam, it's going to be a completely different set of questions. You might get some that are the same, but it's pulling from this enormous pool of questions. So don't focus your studies only on what you got wrong. You want to be able to know everything that's in the exam objectives. But because you're going to walk in and get a completely different set of questions. I've had people tell me that, said I took the exam, I went back and studied exactly what I missed, and the exam was completely different. That's right. The next exam you get is going to be completely different. There's going to be some overlap, but yeah, it's going to be different. Different questions in a different order, different everything. So don't only focus on those things. You still need to focus on everything that's on your exam objectives, but those will certainly tell you places where you need to work a little more. Make sure you know about those. So other folks in the chat room asking questions for my Network Plus PDF. I guess you're referring to my course notes. If we go to professormesser.com/ what was it? Was it MPCN7, Network Plus Course Notes 7? And yes, my Network Plus course notes, as listed there, $20 for the PDF. If you wanted a physical version of that PDF, it's $37. So it's an extra $17 for me to print this thing. I'm not kidding. That's what it costs to print these. They're printed on demand and shipped out. So if you pay an extra $17, you get a printed version, which is identical to the PDF. It's a printed version of the PDF. This is the PDF in a printed form. I say this because sometimes there's a confusion. It says printed course notes, book, and PDF. That's my course notes in a printed book form, and you also get the PDF, the digital version as well, for $37. I figure if you're spending $37 for the printed version, let's give you the PDF for free. So that's what that is. It's exactly the same information, exactly the same number of pages, with exactly the same content on both of those. But one is physical and one is digital. That's the only difference. So I mentioned about optimizing my website. That's one of the things I need to optimize. Because some people still go, oh, printed course notes book and the PDF. Oh, there's a different book. There's a new book. There's a different book. It's the same thing. But it's hard to make that separation. I'm not doing a good job of making that separation is what I'm trying to tell you. So I will do a better job of making that separation in the future. I promise you. But that's what that is. And thank you for asking, or else we'd never be able to figure this out. So there's Shadow Assault in the chat room has my ICND1 course notes. I don't have those here in my hands, but great paper, awesome print. I have to agree. Not to toot a horn, I looked around a long time. I called a lot of different people. It's a challenge when you're ready to print, when you're ready to publish your own book. And some of you may want to do this someday. There are a lot of great places out there to print on demand, but there's advantages and disadvantages to all of them. So I looked around because I'm very particular about the quality of my training materials and the quality of the things that you would receive from me. And so I wanted to find one that would give me a nice, that is a nice color. It's even bright and being shined on with the lights, but the pages are heavy stock. They're nice, bright colors. You don't look at this and go, what, this guy have a Xerox machine in the back and it's not working so great? No, it's beautiful. There's no dots here. It's perfectly clear. It is crisp, nice white colored paper. I agree. I like them. And I went with a company called Vervanti in Minnesota. So if you're someone who, are they in Utah? They're in Utah. So if you, why did I think they were in Minnesota? I've got Minnesota in my head. But in Utah is Vervanti, and they're awesome. So they were able to do this. So anytime you buy a book, it automatically gets sent over to them. They print it on demand, stick it in an envelope. You got your book that has been specifically printed for you being sent to you. And they do it very, very fast. And although the pricing is, I mentioned the pricing's high, that's what it costs. I've looked around a lot of different places, and to be able to print in color is just what it is. So there's a little inside baseball for you. For those of you that are looking to write a book, I've got other books coming this year. Hopefully, I'm already working on those. And those will be black and white books. So there will be another type of book that I'm creating that you will be able to buy a physical version of, and that will also go to Vervanti. And hopefully the price will be a little lower on those because it's printed in black and white. So that might help a little bit, but it'll still be great paper and great documents. And I work with great people there, and it's just weird stuff. When you start shipping things, both inside and outside the country, weird stuff happens all the time. Stuff you would have never imagined, but they do it all the time. So I can call them and go, what is the deal with this? And they go, oh yeah, that happens. Here's how we can fix it. And they fix it. Just craziness. So if you are buying one of these books, I ask you for your physical address. And when you're on my website, you're typing your address, it auto-fills your address. It figures out where you are. If you're in an apartment, make sure your apartment number's there, things like that. So I'll send out a book, and then it'll come back and say, there's no apartment number. That's part of your address. How am I going to get this to you, brother? You got to give me your address. I need your apartment number. So those are the things that are important when you start doing all of this. It gets a little crazy when you start trying to figure out, how can I get this into your hands so you can pass the certification? I want to do it in a way that makes sense for you. And I want to make it as easy as possible for you. And that's just one of the crazy things we do around here to make that happen. There will be more things that we do with these different products and projects this year. And my plans are to really do some interesting things with Network Plus, since this is Network Plus Study Group, with Network Plus and with Security Plus. Just more content available. I don't want to write a book. Somebody has already approached me this week. I get letters from publishers that say, could you help write this book? We need an author for this topic. And that is not what I'm interested in doing. I'm not a book writer. It takes 6 months minimum to write a textbook like that. And I just don't have it's not something I enjoy doing. So I'm probably never going to do that. But I want to create some other types of materials in a book form for you. And so hopefully I'll have something like that I can at least start to show by the end of this year. I know that's not something you can use immediately. If you're studying for your Network Plus right now, probably isn't going to be something that I can help you with now for what you're doing. But next time around, next time through, hopefully we'll have something else there for you and make something available for you to work with and have all of those things available. I think it is anyway, to have all of those pieces available. I like to make as much as possible. It's just time consuming. It's a physics problem like anything else. So hopefully that's one where the physics will work out for all of us. So in the chat room, some folks even asking, does that plan also have a pseudo hands-on study group? And this is one of those that I have talked about doing. I don't think it's on this study group, but on other study groups I've mentioned this, about having one that was in a different format. A lot of this is for the first hour's Q&A. So, for those of you, if you've not been watching what's going on with mobile devices and Q&A, like HQ right now is a big popular thing, that app where it's a live Q&A, you win money, and it takes 20 minutes and it's done. It's an app you use twice a day for 20 minutes each, and they're killing it. It's amazing what they're doing with technology. I like what they do with that. I like being able to do interactive Q&A. That's why we've set this up. But there are things that we could be able to do to have a study group that just was working at the command line. That's all we did. We didn't do Q&A. We just did a command line, and maybe we played around with what we could do at the command line. It was very focused. We went through very specific things. It was not a lot of people stumbling around and doing command line, but there is some ideas of being able to have more study group material in different forms. It's not one that we've gone a long way down that road yet, but it's on our list of here's some interesting things that could happen in the future. So it's an option. It's just not one that it's not been well fleshed out yet. If you have thoughts and ideas, I would love to hear them. What would make sense? I think I know, but what do I know? I'm not the one taking the exam. You are. Another question in the chat room, with Windows 10 always updating, things moving around, forcing you to update, breaking things. How do you see, I added that part, how do you see the new future A+ exam and study materials? How are they going to handle the constant change? I think it'll be the same way they're doing it now. One of the challenges with the A+ exam, you'll notice this with the Network Plus, the operating systems move so fast. By the time the current A+ exam was released almost 3 years ago, it went all the way up to Windows 7. Windows 10 had just come out. Windows 10 was on the street when the A+ came out, but it was so new that it wasn't integrated into the exam objectives. Now, with the way things have gone, everything's running Windows 10. Not everything, but I would say the vast majority of Windows devices are running Windows 10 because Microsoft set a goal to convert everybody to Windows 10. Corporately, they really did a big push. Whether you wanted to go to Windows 10 or not, you went to Windows 10. They were more than happy to apologize rather than ask permission. And now that they've done that, the majority of devices running Windows these days are running Windows 10. Are there still Windows 7 out there? Yes, there is. Is there any other kind of Windows out there? Not really. There's not a lot of 8 and 8.1. There's not a lot of XP. There's a little bit of 7 hanging on, but almost everything's Windows 10. So look at what a change in 3 years. Now compare that to Network Plus over the last 3 years. There were some new topics in the Network Plus exam, but I would not say those new topics are anything that are new. They just sort of added a different focus for the exam as some of the topics they added. The Ethernet is pretty much the same Ethernet we had 3 years ago. Wide area networks are effectively the same wide area networks we had 3 years ago. The differences of the amount of change you have with networking technologies is much slower if you compare it to something like operating systems. So the A+ will never, ever be as up to date as I think most everybody will want. It probably will be that first day it's available. The A+ exam on that first month that it comes out, it's up to date. And then suddenly it's not up to date anymore. Microsoft will update it and provide a new version of Windows 10 that changes a thing that now doesn't apply to any of these study materials. So you may see CompTIA have to take a different approach to that. I don't know. Maybe they'll keep the same way they're doing it. One of the challenges, this happened on the 700 series, is they started off with that not having Windows 7, and then a year after the certification was out, they added Windows 7. Now, that was great for people taking the exam. For people that were creating content, it was chaos. We of course had to go back to our labs and create new content that was able to focus on these Windows 7 topics. But then they didn't change the number of the exam. So you had 701 exam, or really 702 exam before Windows 7, and then you had a book of 701 after Windows 7. So you really had to kind of throw out all your old stuff and tell everybody to focus on the new stuff. And then if they have one of the old books and they're like, it says 702, I'm taking the 702. What do you mean it doesn't have the right stuff in it? It just created a massive problem. And so they decided not to do that anymore, thankfully, because they could have done that easily on this current set of exams. They could have said a year in, wow, Windows 10 has really taken the world by storm. Let's add some Windows 10 topics. Let's change around the exam objectives. And thankfully, they didn't do that. The reality is, if you know Windows 7 really well, then you also know Windows Vista really well. If you know Windows 7 really well, you sort of know the basics of Windows 8 and 8.1. The user interface is a little bit different. When you get to Windows 10, it's kind of more Windows 7 than it was Windows 8, really. There's some nice new features, of course. They took the best of both and kind of combined it into Windows 10. So it's not like you're losing too much. The control panel is still the control panel. The startup process is still the startup process. There's not a huge number of differences between those. So I think they were right to wait. But I would imagine the next A+ exam, I don't know this. I'm not associated with CompTIA at all. I'm not a CompTIA member. I don't plan on being a CompTIA member, but I would imagine there will be a pretty big emphasis on Windows 10 when we finally get to that point, because that's the way the industry has gone. Microsoft has said, we're going to stick on this Windows 10 for a while. They've looked at Apple and said, gosh, you've been running OS 10 a long time, and all you've done is sort of update the name of the animals as you went along. Why didn't we do that? We should have done that. We should have made it one number and updated the animals. And they finally realized that's what we're doing. That's what they decided to do. We're just going to update it now. And of course, they're not smart enough to give it animal names, which is precious. Instead, it's called the Creator Update, or come on, guys. Come on, Microsoft. You got a great operating system. Throw me a bone here. Make this fun for me. Why do you have to call it the Creator Update? Really? Come on. Okay, enough of that. I use Windows 10. I rely on Windows 10. I rely on Windows 7. The switching system that I mentioned earlier, that's Windows 7 all right here. So, I mean, I get it. I need it. I need it to work right. So I rely on it heavily to be able to do that. In chat room, Bradley noticed my Net Plus 007 videos were recently uploaded, and they're done. The question was, are there more to upload? Nope. There are no more to upload. There are plenty of things I can be doing now because I have finished the N10007 course. It is done. It is complete. It is comprehensive. And no more videos are planned to be made. Right now, I finished this last week. This is just done. They're fresh. You can smell the Mimeo. Never mind. There is no more videos coming, but what is happening is now that they're done, there is all the transcribing that's happening. So there are people working on the closed captioning. So what you're going to find right now is some videos already have the closed captioning. As they finish them, they're automatically added. So they watch my videos and they caption everything, and hopefully they're able to spell right because they can see the things on the screen. So those are added. I think those will probably be finished in the next week or two. So all the transcripts, all the closed captioning will be added. So all of my training videos, for those of you not familiar, all of my training videos, not these study groups, but the training videos on my site, every single training video is closed captioned by a human being. It's not the YouTube closed captioning where it doesn't understand when somebody says dynamic routing with BGP and it comes out, it's like some other set of words that make no sense. It's a human that's actually doing these closed captions. When they're done with all of those, I take the transcripts and I add them to my website as well. So you can watch the video, watch the closed captioning, or if you just want to read it on the page. When somebody's speaking, the transcript of someone speaking is not as good as reading a book. So I would not relate that or replace that with reading a book. But if English is not your first language and you need something to kind of follow along with what I'm saying, or you need something you can copy and then paste in to Google Translate to put it into a different language, that's why that's there. So I realize that is not the best way to do translation, but it's a good way to do translation. It's at least gets us somewhere down the road. That will be done the next couple of weeks. At that point, I merge the closed captions into the final videos and I make them available for an offline sale on my website. So you'll see a number of those things start happening over the next couple of weeks. That's what's going on there with those videos. So no more to do. They are complete and done and awesome, and I'm happy with them. I'm proud of that course. I say this after I finish every course, but it's the best course I've done so far. We're always getting better at doing different things. I love that Network Plus course. I have a very specific focus for my courses. I have a very specific idea of what I want that course to be. I know what I don't want the course to be, and we stayed very well along that line for those courses this time. For those of you that are already been studying for the 006, keep studying. The exam doesn't retire until August 31st. Don't shift gears. As I mentioned, over 30% of the N10 007 is new. The only reason that you would ever switch is if you're going to run out of time. And someone in the chat room was mentioning, I'm pretty much ready to take the 006. Good. Take the 006. Don't shift over to the 007. There's no good reason. You earn exactly the same certification. There's no benefit. It's still 3 years, regardless which one you earn. So that's my recommendation. There's no reason to jump through that. So when are they going to change? Well, first, I'll answer the question about changes with the A+ after I take a call. 832 is called. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Caller, which state we're calling from?
I hear me.
Hello, good afternoon.
That's you. You can turn that volume down on your computer and tell me your name, where you're calling from.
Tell me your name, where you're calling from.
Now we got to turn that thing down a little bit.
Hello.
Hey, hi, thanks for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Adi. I'm calling from Eastern Texas.
Well, thanks for calling. What's your question today?
Yeah, I'm new in IT, totally new in IT. I just did my A+. I passed thanks to your videos.
Nice. Congratulations.
I'm just trying to get advice. Hello?
Congratulations on your A+.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to get advice on how to go in the IT field, but I'm totally new in the field. I need advice as a professional in the field. How can you help?
So I'm sorry, you broke up just a little bit there. Ask that question again and maybe a bit slower for me.
Okay. I said I'm totally new to IT. I just passed my A+ thanks to your videos.
Nice.
So I'm seeking advice on how to go in the field. What steps to take? What fields do you think I can go into? What field do you think I can... What field can you advise as a professional in the field for somebody new like me?
Sure. I'll be glad to give you my advice on what I think. Now that the A+, like anything else, it's kind of the starting point in the industry. And you've got now an opportunity to kind of build on that to flesh out what you want to do in information technology. The normal common first step after getting an A+ is to get on some type of help desk environment, whether it's, some people think of help desk as just a big room with everybody on the phone, but when you get into a corporate environment, help desk is often getting up from your desk and going to someone else's desk to be able to solve the problems that they're having. It's usually a little more, a little nicer when you're in that corporate environment working on that help desk. But this is the part where you should begin to learn as much as possible. In the help desk, you have the ability to learn a little bit about the operating systems that are in use, learn a little bit about the networking, learn a little bit about security. You learn what people are doing at databases. There's probably, if you're working in a hospital, there's hospital-specific applications. If you're working in transportation, there's transportation-specific applications. If you're in finance, there's a whole nother set of things. So every type of business will have its own very specific and unique characteristics of the technologies that they use. Those things might help you in the future. If you're in a financial company, you may be able to go to other financial companies there. So I commonly tell people once they get their A+ certification is to get that job. If you're in a position where you don't have an IT job now, you may even want to think of going to some local user group meetings. So if there is a Microsoft user group meeting in your area, that is a great place to meet people who are working for an organization that need people familiar with Microsoft. And that certainly fits with the A+ content. You might want to think of doing that yourself and then meeting those people and seeing what type of jobs are available out there. What do you think your next step will be now that you have the A+?
I'm actually studying for my Network Plus right now.
Okay. I think that's a great place to go to. That's usually when somebody's trying to get into the industry. Usually that's the first 1-2 punch I recommend is now that you've got the A+, the Network Plus kind of gives you a place that's a good jumping off point. And it's usually a good place to stop and say, now what do I want to do in this career? Do I go to databases? Do I go to server administration? Do I work on workstations? Do I go into networking? Do I go into security? The Network Plus, I think, is a good place to kind of start that approach to what you want to do next.
All right. Thank you so much.
I appreciate your call. That's a good position to be in. You've already got your A+. You're working on the Network Plus. It's a perfect place to go. Yeah, if you can't find a user group in your area, try a website like meetup.com. A lot of the local technology groups will put those in Meetup. You might want to try different user groups. Look for a VMware user group. Look for a Microsoft user group. Look for Linux user group. Look for Apple user group. There's a lot of different user groups, and almost every geographical area has one type of these or another. Sometimes it's a programming user group, which isn't necessarily fit into the IT side of things, but if there's no other option, that may be something to at least meet people and have that there. The question in the chat room talked about when are they planning to change A+? Well, the current version of A+ came out 3 years ago, December, next December. So you've got all of this year, calendar year, before you would probably ever see a new version. And then there's usually 6 months after that you could still take the current version. So at this time next year, you're still going to be able to take the current version of the A+. So if you're studying, keep studying, because you're going to be right in schedule to be able to pass your A+, probably before the new version is even released. And even then, you've got another 6 months. You're going to do fine. You're going to do great with your A+ piece of this. Let's go back to the phones, to the +44, whatever you are. Thanks for calling. Caller, where you're calling from, what's your name?
Hello there. My name is Jacob. I'm calling from UK.
Hi, Jacob. Thanks for calling. What question do you have today?
Well, I don't have any questions. I just would like to say thank you for you, because thanks to you, I already work in IT.
Great. I'm happy to have these calls because I don't have to work at all with those. Congratulations on your certification, the work you've done. What type of work are you doing now in IT?
I currently work in the Microsoft Concierge program.
Nice. And is that something you found that you've kind of found a niche for yourself? Are there certain things you found there that you weren't expecting? Are there certain things you think you may be going next? What is how is that working out for you?
Well, it's a great job, but I actually am planning to get into networking. But it's a first step. It's actually my first IT job. I was a teacher before. So it's a great start. But, I'm thinking seriously into going into networking next, to maybe something with security.
That is, as I mentioned earlier, that's exactly the path I took to get into security. I literally started with the help desk and working at the workstation with the client operating system, primarily Windows, to get there, and then moved into servers because that was obviously a big important piece of what we were doing, and then moved from there into networking, and then from networking to security. It's a common path, and especially when you get into security, you're really good. You're really happy in security that you have knowledge of the network and knowledge of the operating systems that you can pull from, because a lot of that just layers right on top.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, I just would like to say thank you very much for you, because I found you like a year and a half ago, and with you and some books I self-studied, and it gave me great knowledge that I'm actually using in my work, and you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
I appreciate it, Jacob. Thank you for calling. I appreciate that. I'm glad to hear it. It's a great story, and keep it up. Thanks so much for calling.
All right, cheers. Bye.
And that, I think, is a good place to end the study group right there. How can we do better than Jacob getting a new job and starting in IT? That's exactly what we want to be able to do here. Thank you for being here. There is a lot more that we're doing throughout the week. Next week at this time is our Security Plus study group. That'll finish up the month, I guess, from our study groups. The replay of this study group and every study group is available to watch immediately afterwards. So if you came in late and you want to rewind and see the whole thing, it takes a couple of minutes for it to process, and then you can watch the whole thing. I hope to get the podcast up by this evening, so you could even listen in while you're traveling to do those other things as well. Of course, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and subscribe over on the YouTube side. Thank you, of course, for all of your ongoing support. Thanks for your first hour of Q&A. Couldn't do it without you. And thank you for your questions here in the after show. Again, couldn't do it without you. Thanks so much for that. Thanks for joining us this time, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group.